Hey, Wide Awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories. I don't usually do first dates on rainy nights. It feels like the kind of setting movies use when something weird is about to happen, but that night, I guess I was feeling spontaneous. The rain was steady, tapping against the windshield as I ducked under the awning of the little diner he picked. Neon lights buzzed softly, reflecting off puddles on the asphalt, giving the parking lot this weird glow. It was the kind of light that makes everything look romantic in pictures but feels hollow in person. He was already there when I arrived, standing by the door with one of those faint smiles that's friendly but not overbearing. I noticed right away he wasn't fidgeting, wasn't nervously checking his phone or looking around. He just stood there, calm, as if he'd been expecting me for a long time. There's something unnerving about someone who can wait in absolute stillness, like they've done it before, or know exactly how long it takes for you to show up. The diner itself smelled like coffee, greasy fries, and something sweet, like caramelized sugar stuck in the corners of the ceiling tiles. We slid into a booth near the window, watching the rain smear the city outside, colors bending in the puddles. The first part of the date was easy enough. Small talk, jokes that landed just enough to keep it light, the usual questions about work and movies and music. Nothing remarkable, just safe conversation. I remember thinking, about halfway through the meal, that there was something strangely rehearsed about him. The way he picked up the menu, the way he asked what I wanted, the way he listened, it was precise, but not stiff. Precise in a way that made you feel he was following an unspoken script you didn't know existed. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was the rain, the lighting, the quiet hum of the diner. As the night wore on, the conversation began to drift. Nothing alarming, just casual stories, the kind that fill time on a first date. He had a laugh that was soft, but it felt controlled, like someone practicing natural laughter in front of a mirror. I noticed little things, his hands resting lightly on the table, not touching mine, but also not distant. His eyes scanning occasionally toward the door as if measuring something. I pushed the thoughts aside. It was a first date, not an interrogation. Toward the end of the night, I got up to grab my coat. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air outside was sharp, damp, and cold. I turned back toward him, expecting the usual "do you want a ride?" or "see you later" kind of line. Instead, he just smiled. Not a little smile, not a casual grin. It was the kind of smile that makes your stomach twist without knowing why. Calm, but deliberate, like someone who knows a secret you can't touch. He said, "See you next time." My chest went tight. "See you next time." I froze, realizing I hadn't even learned his name. We'd been talking for hours. I didn't know what he did, where he lived, what he called himself. Nothing. But somehow he knew mine. My name had slipped out in conversation, yes, but I had thought nothing of it, just ordinary sharing. And yet the way he said it, the way the syllables formed in his mouth, made it feel like he had been waiting for me to leave just so he could say that. As if he had been planning this moment, not me. The rain pattered harder against the hood of my coat. I wanted to laugh nervously, to shake it off, but the unease had settled in my chest. The diner's neon lights reflected in the puddles, blurring the edges of the street, and I realized I couldn't remember seeing him enter. I remembered seeing him standing there waiting, but I didn't remember him arriving. The thought didn't feel rational, and yet I couldn't shake it. I walked toward my car slowly, rain soaking my coat, hoots splashing in puddles, each step echoing against the empty street. Every now and then I glanced back. The diner's windows glowed, neon buzzing, but he wasn't there. The booth where we had sat was empty. The city hummed normally around me, streetlights flickered, tires hissed over wet asphalt. Nothing should have been alarming. Nothing had happened yet. But my mind replayed it over and over. The calmness of his demeanor, the precision of his actions, the way he never offered his name but knew mine. "See you next time." Words that should have been harmless, now loaded with something I couldn't define. A threat. A promise. My stomach tightened every time I thought about it. I got into my car, door slamming, the engine starting with a low hum. The rain smeared across the windshield, droplets racing in long, frantic lines. I thought about texting a friend, about calling someone to laugh nervously about the date, but my phone felt heavy in my pocket. Like the air around me had shifted, and suddenly I was alone in the quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound. On the drive home, the city felt wrong. Street lights that should have glowed evenly were flickering oddly. Shadows in alleyways stretched too long, moved just slightly against the natural light. I kept thinking about that smile, see you next time, and felt the certainty that he could show up anywhere, anytime, because he had known me in ways that I hadn't consented to, in ways I couldn't fully articulate. When I got home, locked the door, closed the curtains, the unease didn't leave. The room smelled like rain, wet concrete, and a faint trace of diner grease. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that I was imagining things, that first dates always leave you with weird instincts that aren't really there. But my mind kept circling back to that smile. The ease of it, the precision, the way he had known my name while keeping his hidden. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time my phone buzzed, heart jumping, thinking it might be him, some new message, a reminder of the control he had over the night. I imagined walking down streets, grocery stores, the library, thinking he could be anywhere, watching, waiting. And the realization that I didn't know his name gave the whole encounter a hollow, almost impossible quality. He could vanish entirely, and I'd never have a clue. Days later, I drove past the diner again. Neon lights buzzing, puddles still reflecting the glow. Nothing seemed unusual, the city alive and ordinary. I wanted to tell myself that I had imagined it, that the tension, the fear, the smile were just nerves, first date jitters. But the memory of see you next time lingered, lingering like a shadow across my mind. And I realized that that's what stuck with me. It wasn't a scream or an attack or something immediate. It was the quiet, the calm, the precision, the knowledge he had while remaining invisible in the details. He didn't need to tell me his name to unsettle me completely. He didn't need to explain why he had chosen that moment, or how long he had waited, or how much he knew. All he needed was to smile, speak the words "see you next time," and disappear into the city, leaving me with the feeling that I had been carefully observed, catalogued, and set aside for a future encounter. I still think about it, the streets, the neon, the rain. I wonder if I'll ever see him again, and if I do, will I know his name, or will the pattern repeat, leaving me to navigate the encounter with only my own unease as a guide. The horror was subtle, quiet, and entirely personal, lodged in the thought that someone could know you perfectly without ever revealing themselves. And somehow, that knowledge felt more dangerous than anything else. I thought I had picked a chill spot for the date. It was a tiny rooftop cafe above a bookstore. String lights hung haphazardly, some of them flickering, giving it this half-cozy, half-abandoned vibe. The kind of place you'd think was cute in pictures but felt lonely in person. He was already there when I arrived, leaning against the railing, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, smiled that kind of too easy smile, and I felt that little flutter of relief that first dates sometimes give you, the kind that disappears fast if you're unlucky. The first part of the evening was normal enough. Drinks were decent, the kind that tasted like someone tried but didn't overdo it. We talked about work, movies, music, small safe stuff. Occasionally, a breeze would hit the rooftop and make the lights dance, shadows across his face, across the table, and for a moment it felt cinematic, like I was living a scene in a movie where the date could still go okay. Then I excused myself to the bathroom. The way he watched me leave, not leering or staring too long, just quietly, made me notice the weight of his presence. Something about the way he leaned back, arms crossed, gave me a sense of calculation. Nothing overt, just a subtle undercurrent that made me hurry to the restroom. The bathroom was tiny, single stall, tiles cracked in places, smelled faintly of old cleaning supplies. I washed my hands slowly, feeling uneasy, like the air itself had changed while I was gone. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A message from him, across the table, "Don't look up." I froze. My first reaction was disbelief. Maybe a weird joke. Maybe he was testing me. My stomach sank when I glanced back toward the table. It was empty, of course. The table sat under one of the flickering string lights, my drink half empty, napkin crumpled. Nothing else. No sign of him. The rooftop stretched behind, city noises distant and muffled, the usual late-night traffic hum. But the feeling hit me immediately, something was wrong. The text wasn't playful, it wasn't joking. It was urgent, a warning. I leaned against the sink, trying to calm myself. Maybe it was a prank, or a friend messing with my phone. But then I realized my phone had no other notifications, no unusual apps. This was coming from him. My heart started hammering, thinking about the last 30 minutes of casual smiles and conversation. Could someone be messing with me that smoothly, that precisely? I texted back, careful not to sound panicked. Nothing. Just a chilling echo of that first message. I tried to focus on logic. He was sitting across the table. He couldn't have moved. And yet, I couldn't shake the pull of dread that something was wrong. Like the air itself had been thickened, timed perfectly for me to be in the bathroom at that exact second. I went back out slowly, every step calculated. The rooftop lights flickered again, shadows swinging across the floor. The table was still empty. I froze, hand hovering over the railing, scanning the scene. There was nothing. No drink spilled, no footprints, no unusual movements. It was almost too perfect. The kind of emptiness that doesn't belong in a normal city night. I sat down, trying to convince myself he had texted ahead of me leaving, maybe anticipating something. It didn't make sense. Why would he tell me not to look up if nothing was happening? A faint breeze carried the smell of wet asphalt from the street below. I stared at the string lights above, watching them flicker, trying not to look too high, trying to obey that instinct drilled into me by a message I didn't understand but felt like a direct command. Then movement caught my eye, not from the city, not from the other tables, but in the corner of the rooftop near the old vent pipe. It wasn't clear at first, just a shadow stretching long and impossible. I blinked, and it seemed closer. The breeze stirred, lights danced, and the shadow grew slow and deliberate. My body tensed. The shadow didn't move like a human would. It stretched unnaturally, bending at angles that made my stomach twist. I realized I had been warned that I shouldn't look up because whatever it was above the string of lights. My instinct screamed at me to bolt. I tried, but my legs felt heavy, cemented in place by panic and disbelief. The shadow grew, crawling along the edge of the rooftop, seemingly aware of my gaze. It didn't cast a reflection. It didn't seem to belong to anything real. The city hum became muted in my ears, heartbeats loud, and then, almost imperceptibly, the air shifted around me. I tried to text him, but my fingers wouldn't type. The phone felt foreign in my hand. A whisper of movement to the right, near the railing, made me glance sideways. My drink trembled, the condensation beating in tiny, perfect lines down the glass. Something was perched on the edge, impossible and still, observing. The whole rooftop seemed too quiet now, as if holding its breath. I thought about screaming, about running, but my body refused. Everything in my logic, everything in my memory screamed that nothing here should be possible, and yet I could feel it. The hairs on my arms, the back of my neck, the prickling sensation that my mind couldn't name. I remembered the text, "Don't look up," and for the first time, I obeyed completely. I didn't glance. I didn't twist my neck. I didn't risk it. The feeling of presence above me pressed down through the bones of my spine, filling my chest with a leaden, panicked weight. Minutes stretched, or maybe hours, the sense of that presence unrelenting, the air vibrating in sync with my pulse. The city noises returned subtly, muffled, distorted. I slowly turned my gaze back to the table, only to find my phone had buzzed again. A message from him, almost casual this time. Good. I couldn't comprehend. I wanted to get up, leave, run down the stairs, but my legs were frozen. The table around me felt unreal, the chairs, the lights, the empty drink, all part of some distorted stage. The shadow above, whatever it was, had receded, leaving an emptiness that pressed on me almost more than its presence had. I looked across the table. He was sitting there, calm, hands folded like nothing had happened. The way he smiled made my stomach twist. The message, the warning, the impossible shadow. It was him, or it was orchestrated entirely around him. Either way, the horror wasn't something I could outrun. It was in following the instruction, in obeying without question, in feeling the control he had over the impossible, over my fear. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I couldn't speak much, couldn't laugh, couldn't look around. The lights flickered. The wind brushed my hair across my face. The city below moved and breathed normally. He ordered dessert, paying with a casual swipe of his card, chatting like everything was fine. I nodded along, careful not to look up. Each bite of ice cream felt alien in my mouth, flavorless, the texture wrong. I wanted to leave, but leaving felt like betrayal, like I'd been told a rule and I couldn't break it. We eventually got up, walked down the narrow staircase, him casually holding the door open, watching me descend first. The street below was normal again, people passing by, streetlights humming a familiar tune. My phone buzzed one last time, a single word. Later. I went home that night, door closed behind me, lights on, every shadow in the apartment familiar and safe. And I kept thinking about the rooftop, about the shadow above, about the text about him. The sense of something watching, something orchestrated, something that knew exactly where I was and when didn't leave. I didn't text him again. I deleted the messages, trying to forget. And sometimes when I see shadows in unfamiliar places or flickering lights or feel that uncanny stillness in a room, I remember the rooftop, the text, the warning I obeyed without knowing why. The horror wasn't in a jump or a touch or a scream. It was in obeying completely and feeling the impossible press down and realizing that he could make it happen, all from across the table, just by telling me not to look up. I didn't expect much from online dating, honestly. I'd swiped through a dozen profiles that week, mostly boring or weirdly intense, until this picture popped up. Casual hoodie, messy hair, the kind of smile that made you want to believe he wasn't going to be a complete nightmare. We decided on a small diner downtown, neon sign flickering, a little rundown, kind of empty on a weeknight. The kind of place where you feel like no one is really watching but someone might be. I liked that. It felt safe in a low-key way. He showed up on time, leaning against a brick wall outside, phone in hand, glancing around like he was waiting for someone but also not really caring if he was late. I waved, and he smiled that same picture-perfect smile. We went inside, ordered, and started talking. It was normal at first, awkward in parts, smooth in others, the usual first date dance. I tried to pay attention to his eyes, his hands, his laugh, the little tells people have when they're nervous. He didn't have any, or maybe I just couldn't read them. The food came, and it was just diner food. Fries, burgers, coffee that tasted like slightly bitter water, but we both pretended it was fine. Conversation flowed, mostly safe topics, a little laughter, a little silence, and then it was time to pay. He reached for the check casually, and I assumed he'd grab it and hand it to the server. Instead, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table toward me. I unfolded it slowly, and it wasn't a check. It was a contract. Printed on crisp white paper, not handwritten formal, the kind of thing you'd expect in a lawyer's office. I stared at it, trying to laugh it off, but the words caught me in a pit of cold dread. It was a contract for dating, a legal agreement. It outlined rules, schedules, obligations, fines for breaking promises. Clauses about daily messages, dinner schedules, rules for conversations, penalties for ghosting or lying, rules about who could contact who and when. There were lines for signatures, places for witnesses. The legalese made it worse. I couldn't even parse it properly because my brain refused to accept that this was happening. I looked at him, half expecting a joke, a laugh, someone to tell me I was overreacting. He just waited calm, watching me like he was seeing if I would comply. I tried to hand it back, but he shook his head slightly, still smiling. The server came by, asked if we were ready to pay. He waved her off, folding the contract neatly and putting it back in his jacket. Then he reached across the table and said something I couldn't hear, but I got the feeling it was an insistence, a quiet command. The air in the diner seemed to compress, a subtle weight pressing down on me. Other customers, in booths nearby, glanced over with mild curiosity, but none spoke, none reacted. I read through more of the contract in disbelief. There were sections about consequences if I ever decided to leave him, sections about shared schedules, sections about emergency contact obligations, and a whole page about personal property and belongings, almost like he anticipated controlling everything around me. My stomach twisted, my coffee cup shaking in my hand. I realized I had to get out. I stood up, saying something about needing a phone signal. He didn't move. He just followed, standing up, folding his arms. His calm presence felt heavier than any weight I've ever carried. The diner door opened, and the rain outside had started again, tapping on the neon sign and the windows. I thought about running, about bolting straight into the street, but something about him made me hesitate. Like if I ran, he'd still be waiting for me to comply, waiting for me to sign. We stepped outside. The street was mostly empty, the city lights reflected on the wet asphalt. He didn't grab me, didn't say a word, but he walked beside me in a way that felt inevitable. I tried calling a friend, but my phone battery was dead. I cursed silently, feeling trapped. He glanced at the diner behind us, nodded slightly, like approving some kind of unseen witness. We passed a liquor store, the flickering fluorescent lights casting strange shadows across the sidewalk. He stopped, took another piece of paper from his pocket, smaller this time. It was another page of the contract, detailing penalties for noncompliance, clauses about behavior outside of official dates, consequences for talking to friends about him, and something about reporting every minor infraction in writing. I took it automatically, my fingers trembling, but I didn't read it. I couldn't. I was terrified of seeing the full scope. He smiled faintly, and I realized the horror wasn't just the contract. It was him. He wasn't just controlling the paper, the rules, the schedules. He was measuring reactions, testing obedience. He had a rhythm, a presence, a way of existing in the space beside me that made every instinct I had scream that I needed to escape. And yet, I couldn't just turn around. I felt like I was walking willingly, following some invisible set of rules that had been written long before tonight. We reached a small park. The benches were slick with rain, and the fountain was off, dry, cracked. He gestured vaguely toward the air, and suddenly, the contract was in my hands again. But this time it had more pages, clauses detailing psychological compliance, social obligations, even rules about dreams and thoughts. I couldn't comprehend the logic, the audacity, the complete invasive nature of it. And I realized he expected me to sign it. I had no pen, no paper. That didn't matter. The expectation hung in the air like a threat, like the contract existed whether I touched it or not. I tried to leave. I spun on my heel and started walking fast down the empty street, hoping for a cab, hoping for anything. But he was still there, beside me, pacing at the same speed, matching every step. The papers never left my hand. The streetlights flickered in sync with my panic, making shadows stretch long and unnatural. Every reflection of me in the wet asphalt showed him standing behind, waiting, arms folded, patient. I ducked into an alley, hoping to lose him in the twists and turns, but the moment I did, the alley warped, stretched impossibly, leading me back to the park. He was waiting on the same cracked fountain, calm, folded arms, the contract in his hand. The world had become a loop. Every street corner, every turn, every alley led back to him, to the expectation, to the inevitability of signing. I couldn't breathe. I leaned against the fountain, my chest heaving, looking at the papers at him. He smiled faintly, handed them to me, and for the first time, I realized the true horror. It wasn't the legal words, the rules, the contracts. It was him. He had set the rules, created the papers, bent the streets, shaped the timing. He had me fully, completely, without force. The contract was just a formality. The real control was in his presence, in the expectation, in the way the city had warped to accommodate his little test. The rain let up slightly. I could hear distant cars, muted, almost like they belonged to another world. He reached out, brushing a finger along the paper's edge, and I felt it like an electric shock through my fingers. The contract didn't need my signature. I already felt bound. I had already failed some unspoken requirement just by existing, by reacting, by trying to escape. I finally left the park, moving slowly, carefully aware of his presence, even when he wasn't physically next to me. The contract stayed with me in my bag, folded neatly, the edges sharp and cold. I never opened it again, but I can feel it, sense it, a weight pressing into my ribs every time I sit down, every time I think about him. He didn't need a check, didn't need my compliance in ink. He had already claimed me in some abstract, impossible way, through expectation, presence, and time. I never replied to his messages after that, never went on another date. The diner still exists, neon sign flickering, but I don't go there. Sometimes I walk past it, see someone leaning against the wall, smiling casually, and I feel the same weight pressing down on me. I think about the contract, the clauses, the papers that could control me even without words, and I realize that the horror isn't in being physically trapped. It's in knowing someone can bend the world around you so completely, silently, that signing isn't even necessary. I thought I had figured him out in the first 10 minutes of meeting. He was charming, casual, a little too smooth maybe, but not in a scary way at first. We met at this tiny coffee shop tucked between two old apartment buildings, the kind that smelled like burnt espresso and old newspapers. It was raining lightly, the streets reflecting the orange glow of street lamps. I liked the ambience. He smiled too much, but I laughed anyway, thinking it was cute. That was my first mistake. We ordered, sat by a window that fogged up instantly from the rain outside, and started talking. The conversation was normal, awkward in that new date way, and I tried to focus on him rather than the wet sidewalk outside. Then my phone buzzed. A small vibration in my purse. I pulled it out, expecting a notification from a friend or the coffee shop app, but the screen showed something impossible. A text from him, timestamped an hour from now. It said he was breaking up with me. Just like that, simple, brutal. The text wasn't mean, just matter of fact. My stomach flipped. I checked the time. It hadn't even arrived yet. I tapped the screen. Maybe it was some weird app glitch or predictive texting nonsense. But the timestamp didn't lie. It read exactly an hour in the future. I stared at him across the table. He sipped his drink, calm, like nothing had happened, like he didn't know what I was staring at. I tried to focus on him, tried to ignore the text, but the second buzz came, same timestamp. The same message. The phone wouldn't let me swipe it away. Tapping it did nothing. I realized the message had a subtle glow, faint, almost like it was alive. The coffee shop around me seemed normal, but somehow quieter. Conversations from other tables dulled, laughter became distant, and the hum of the espresso machine sounded farther away than it should have. I tried talking to him about it, gesturing at my phone, but the words caught in my throat. It was impossible to explain without sounding insane. He didn't notice. He didn't react at all. It was like the world had paused, my perspective the only thing moving, the only thing real. The message kept blinking. The timestamp still an hour away. I realized I could feel the minutes slipping past me, slow, deliberate, like the clock had stretched its hands to torment me. After a while, I tried to ignore it, hoping it was some weird future glitch. But then the cave's lights flickered. Not a normal flicker, but long, almost hesitating. And every time it happened, I felt a subtle tug in my chest, like something was trying to make me pay attention to the message, prepare me. He smiled, not at me, not at the message, just somewhere beyond the window, like he was aware of something I couldn't see yet. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the streets were warped, slightly twisted in impossible angles. The reflection in the wet pavement wasn't mine. It was him, standing holding the phone, tapping out the same text I was reading, timestamped an hour later, looking directly at me. My hand trembled over my phone, and the next blink of the cafe lights made me flinch so hard I almost dropped it. I tried to leave. I gathered my purse, my coat, and felt the weight of the impossible pressing down. The door to the coffee shop opened normally, but when I stepped outside, it was wrong. The rain had returned, heavier now, but it was coming from the wrong direction. The streetlights flickered in sequences that made no sense. I could hear my own heart pounding like a drum in my ears, drowning out everything else. And across the street, I saw myself, standing under a street lamp, reading the same text from him, looking terrified. My other self turned to me, shaking her head slightly, trying to warn me. I froze. I couldn't move. My date stepped outside behind me, calm, smiling in a way that didn't fit the setting. He reached out a hand, and even though I didn't touch it, I felt the cold pull of it. The text buzzed again, this time right in my hand, timestamped exactly 35 minutes from now. I realized it was counting down, and the closer it got to the hour, the more everything around me warped. The trees bent slightly, the asphalt seemed to ripple. The cafe behind me stretched and compressed, a rubbery, impossible reflection of itself. I tried to run. My legs felt like concrete, heavy and unresponsive. Every step echoed like someone else was walking behind me, duplicating my movements. The closer I got to the street corner, the more the air thickened, pressing against my chest. The wind carried whispers, faint, in my own voice, warning me, repeating the words from the future. I couldn't understand who was speaking, me, him, someone else entirely. He smiled again, reaching for my wrist, and suddenly I wasn't in control. My arm lifted, moving toward him, even as every part of me screamed not to. The text buzzed again. 20 minutes to go. I looked at the timestamp and felt the impossible logic of it like a weight. How could a text from the future exist? And why was it targeting me like this? I realized that this wasn't just a message. It was a countdown, a record, a signal. It was informing me of something that had to happen, and every tick brought it closer to inevitability. I turned to run again, and the world outside bent with me. The streetlights stretched into thin rods of light. The reflections on wet asphalt twisted my own image into something alien. I could see the moment in the reflection when I would receive the text in 30 minutes, my face drained of hope, eyes wide, jaw slack. I tried to avoid it, to divert the timeline, but no matter what I did, the reflections followed. The world around me became a theater of inevitability, scenes looping, repeating in subtle variations, always showing the next timestamp, always showing me receiving the breakup. I stopped moving, realizing that fighting was useless. The rain intensified, and each drop felt heavy, solid, like small weights landing on my shoulders, pressing me down. The text buzzed again, 15 minutes to go. I could see it floating in the reflections, hovering in the windows, hovering on the street signs, floating like a ghost of the future, insisting it would happen. I understood then that he, the man sitting calmly beside me, was orchestrating this, not consciously maybe, but present in some impossible way. He existed outside the rules that bound me. He could observe, wake, and release the inevitable text. The remaining time passed slower than real time. 10 minutes, 5, 2. Each buzz of the phone made my skin crawl, made my chest tighten, made the air ripple around me. People passed on the sidewalk, blurred, stretched, warped, not reacting to me at all. The cafe behind me flickered into nothingness. The windows dissolving into light and shadow. I was alone with the countdown, alone with him, alone with the impossible inevitability of the text that would arrive in exactly 1 hour. Then it happened. The phone buzzed one final time. The timestamp matched the current time perfectly. My hands trembled as I opened it, the message exactly as predicted. I felt numb, like my body had been drained of all warmth and energy. The world had returned to normal outside, streets straight, rain stopping, street lights glowing evenly. But the memory of the warped reflections, the impossible cave, the mirrored future, pressed into my mind. He stood there beside me, calm, smiling faintly. I looked at him trying to find a hint of mischief, a clue that any of this could be explained rationally. But his eyes were flat, unreadable. The text didn't go away. The countdown was over, and the reflection of me in the puddles, in the windows in the street, remained frozen in that moment, always watching, always waiting, a ghost of the moment I couldn't escape from. I walked home slowly, the phone in my hand, knowing that tomorrow it would buzz again for the same timestamp, maybe for the next iteration of this date. The air outside was clear now, peaceful, but the memory of what had happened, the impossible, remained in me. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was bending around him, around the message around me, that it wasn't over, not really. Even now, when I see a timestamp, a notification, or a reflection that isn't quite right, I feel that tightening in my chest, the memory of the countdown, the inevitability. And somewhere I know that if he sat across from me again, smiling and calm, the phone would buzz once more, telling me the future, and I wouldn't be able to change a thing. I didn't even realize how late it was until the bar emptied around us. The place had started out normal, cozy, dim lights, a playlist that wasn't too loud. We had ordered too many drinks, laughed at stupid things, and for a while I thought this might actually be a fun night. Then it started to feel off, small things at first, like how she didn't seem to notice the bartender cleaning the glasses beside us, or how she always followed my movements with her eyes even when I wasn't looking at her. I checked my phone. It was past midnight. I called an Uber, thinking I'd send her home first since she lived a few blocks away. She agreed, but her agreement didn't feel like normal agreement. It was quiet, almost polite, but her eyes held something I couldn't name. The Uber arrived quickly, a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver glanced at us in the rearview mirror, the kind of glance that lingers too long, sizing you up without smiling. I opened the door and gestured for her to get in first. The second she slid into the back seat, the driver's expression didn't change, but he said something strange. He said thanks. Not to her, to me. Thanks for bringing her back. The words hung in the car like they carried weight I didn't understand. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe he meant thanks for returning a lost item or something, but he didn't clarify. He just sat there, hands at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. I got in, muttering her address again to confirm. The driver didn't respond. As soon as we started moving, the atmosphere got heavy. It wasn't the kind of heavy that comes from traffic or exhaustion. It was something else. I noticed the way she sat, perfectly still, staring straight ahead, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She wasn't looking at the city lights with passing streets. She was staring at nothing, and I had the creeping feeling she wasn't really in the car with me. I tried talking, asking if she had a long day, if she was tired, but the words felt hollow. Her lips didn't move, and when I looked at her, she gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod, but didn't reach her eyes. The air between us got colder, though the windows were rolled up and the heater was on full blast. My breath fought slightly in the glass, but hers didn't. There was no mist, no warmth escaping her body, just stillness. The driver didn't acknowledge anything. No music, no conversation, just a steady hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. I tried to relax, to tell myself it was just me being paranoid after too many drinks, but something about the way he kept thanking me in his head, as though this was an obligation fulfilled, made the hairs on my neck prickle. We reached a point in the drive where the city lights thinned out, streets less familiar, more desolate. I pointed out a familiar building to reassure myself we were on track, and she finally moved her head slightly, glancing at the window, but then she went back to staring at the seat in front of her, unblinking. I could see her jaw tense, like she was holding something inside. I tried again, casually mentioning her street, the neighborhood. She didn't answer. The driver slowed down, stopped, and looked at me through the mirror. His eyes were dark, unflinching, and for a moment I thought he was going to turn the car around. Then he said thanks again. His tone was flat, polite, but heavy, like the words were tied to something I couldn't see. I swallowed hard and said her address again, louder this time, hoping to anchor reality. He didn't move. He just looked at me. And that's when I realized she wasn't getting any reaction, but the air in the car had shifted. It was thick, sticky, almost vibrating. My chest felt tight, and I could hear the faint sound of something breathing, slow, uneven, but not hers. I leaned forward, trying to catch his eyes to figure out what was going on, but he wouldn't meet mine. Instead, he glanced at her once, nodded slightly, and kept driving. The road curved in ways that made no sense. Street signs I should recognize weren't there. Houses looked wrong. The trees leaned too far, casting twisted shadows. It was like the city had folded into itself, and we were driving through a version of it that shouldn't exist. I realized then that she wasn't alive, not in the way a normal person is alive. The way the driver kept thanking me, the way her hands rested on her lap like she was waiting, the way she never breathed audibly, never moved, never reacted. I knew somehow that this was her second, third, or maybe more version of herself. Each date, each ride, each return. The driver had been expecting her, or maybe expecting me, and the thank you wasn't for courtesy. It was for fulfilling something that had to happen. I tried to stay calm, rational. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate joke, some performance art. But the frost creeping along the windows inside the car, the way the heater did nothing for me, and the almost imperceptible hum vibrating under the seat told me it wasn't a joke. The more we drove, the heavier it felt. I noticed that the lights of the city reflected differently in the car windows. My own reflection looked elongated, wrong, as if stretched by something behind me. I caught glimpses of her face in the glass behind me, not through the window, but the reflections of the dashboard and rearview mirror. She wasn't mirrored properly. Her eyes seemed too dark, her expression too calm, her mouth too still. The driver took a sharp turn down a street that wasn't her street. I started to panic, telling myself to get out, to make him stop, to grab her hand and leave, but my body wouldn't obey fully. My movements felt sluggish, weighted. I realized it wasn't just fear. The air in the car had density, almost like it pressed against my limbs, holding me down, keeping me seated, keeping me in place while the driver carried us somewhere else. I looked at her. She didn't acknowledge anything. Her head tilted slightly, but only because the car swerved. She was calm, almost expected. And then it hit me. She wanted this, or maybe she had been waiting for this. The coldness I felt wasn't just physical. It was her radiating, saturating the car, filling me with the realization that this wasn't a normal first date. She wasn't normal, and I wasn't supposed to notice, supposed to understand. The driver's thanks repeated in my mind over and over, like a chant I couldn't stop. I felt my pulse hammering, my vision narrowing. The road ahead twisted into darkness, no street lights, no familiar signs, only the faint gleam of headlights reflecting off the hood and the distant outline of trees leaning over the asphalt. The driver didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't even breathe audibly. He just drove, and I realized he had no intention of taking her home. He wasn't a driver. He was a guardian, a keeper, a facilitator of something beyond my comprehension. I wanted to scream, to leap out, to somehow fight back, but the car's interior felt like it was made of lead. Even her presence felt like it held me in place, like the air around her was a physical force pressing against my chest. My hands rested on my knees, useless, trembling, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, after what felt like hours but could have been minutes, the car stopped. The driver killed the engine. No words, no warning. He turned, glanced at me in the mirror, and whispered thanks. Simple, calm, polite. And then he opened the door for her gently, like releasing a delicate object. She slid out, perfectly composed, and walked toward a dimly lit alley that hadn't been there before. The headlights caught her face just for a second. It was pale, untouched by emotion, untouched by life, perfect in an impossible way. I tried to move, to follow, but the driver shook his head, silent, almost mournful. The car's door closed, and the engine hummed back to life. He drove off without a word. I stayed there frozen on the curb, watching her disappear into the shadows. The alley swallowed her, and when I blinked, it was gone. The street looked normal again, lit by streetlights, the fog rolling away like it had never been there. I walked home slowly, feeling my legs stiff, my heart pounding in disbelief. The Uber receipt stayed on my phone. No destination logged, only the fare. It charged me $50, though no address had ever been entered. I couldn't explain it. When I got inside my apartment, I checked every window, every mirror, and she was nowhere. But the cold lingered, a faint trace on my hands, like a warning or a reminder. Sometimes late at night, I hear a soft hum outside, like a car engine idling, and I swear I see a black sedan parked a few blocks down, headlights off, waiting. I don't answer. I don't move. And I can't shake the image of her walking into that alley, calm, pale, untouched by reality, leaving me behind in the normal world while she disappears somewhere I don't belong. I was running late, of course. The street was quiet, fog rolling off the river, the kind of damp chill that gets into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I thought I had time to grab a coffee, but I left it on the counter, racing down the cracked sidewalk toward the low cafe where we were supposed to meet. It was the kind of place that looked cozy from the outside, warm lights glowing through the windows, smells of coffee and pastry drifting into the street. I pushed the door open, and the warmth hit me immediately. People were scattered at tables, sipping drinks, scrolling on phones, talking in low voices. And there she was, sitting alone at a corner table, a single candle flickering between us. The first thing I noticed was her hand. It was ice cold. I mean, colder than anything I'd ever felt in winter, colder than holding a soda I can straight from the fridge, colder than the metal of the fire escape railing outside my apartment. I reached across the table instinctively to shake it, and she let me. Her fingers were stiff, like they belonged to someone else or something else. The skin was pale, almost translucent, and the second our hands touched, a shock ran up my arm that made me yelp in my head. She whispered, quiet, almost a breath, that she hadn't been warm since her last date. I laughed nervously, thinking she meant figuratively, a joke about loneliness or bad luck. But the tone, the way her lips barely moved, made my stomach knot. She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed focused on the candle flame flickering between us, and the shadows it cast on her face made her look thinner than she was, like the flame was eating her from the inside out. I tried to settle in, to focus on the menu, anything to distract myself from the unnatural cold that seeped from her hand into mine, the way it made my fingers go numb even as I tried to pull away. She didn't let go. Not really. Just a slow, almost casual hold that made me feel like she was testing me, waiting for me to react. We ordered drinks. She picked for both of us, a hot tea for me, though it arrived lukewarm, and some kind of black coffee for herself. She sipped hers carefully, lips barely touching the rim. I noticed condensation forming on the outside of her cup, a faint frost, and when I looked up, the candlelight flickered across her face in a way that made the shadows stretch unnaturally. Conversation felt heavy. She asked about my job, my apartment, my life, but it wasn't like normal small talk. It was precise, almost rehearsed, like she was learning everything in case she had to remember it later. I laughed at a joke she made, and she tilted her head slightly, as if confused by the sound, as though laughter was a foreign thing she didn't understand. The cold didn't leave me. It was everywhere she was. I could feel it crawling under my skin, settling in my chest, numbing my arms and legs, and the longer we sat, the colder she became. Her hand was still in mine, but now it felt more like ice against metal than skin against skin. It started to creep up my wrist, and I had to fight not to jerk it away, not to panic. I looked around. The cafe was normal, people chatting, the coffee machine hissing in the corner, the soft jazz playing over the speakers. But the warmth of the room didn't reach her. It didn't even reach the corner where she sat. There was a frost on the edges of the table, faint, barely visible, and my hand stayed numb from her touch. She leaned closer at one point, and I noticed a faint mist leaving her mouth, like I could see the cold escaping her in little clouds. She whispered again, quiet, like she was afraid of being overheard, that she hadn't been warm since her last date. That time I didn't laugh. My throat went dry. My heart started racing in a way that made my vision blur at the edges. I tried to stand up, to excuse myself, but my body wouldn't move. My hand was locked in hers. I couldn't pull away. I could only look down at the table, at the frost creeping along the edges, at her calm, pale face. She tilted her head slightly, watching me, and the candle flame danced across her eyes, making them glint unnaturally. The people around us faded from focus. The hum of conversation became a distant murmur. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was the feeling that the space around her wasn't normal. Like she carried a weight that pushed the air back, that made warmth impossible, that made time feel slower. My fingers tingled painfully and went numb and felt heavy, like they weren't mine anymore. The longer I sat, the more I noticed little details. The steam from her coffee didn't rise. It hung in the air in tiny clouds, then sank back down like it was being pulled to her rather than rising naturally. The candle flame flickered in rhythm with her breathing, and shadows seemed to twist around her seat in ways they shouldn't, stretching and bending like the walls themselves were warping. I tried to talk to distract myself, to ask her something normal, anything, but my voice sounded distant, almost muffled, like it belonged to someone else. She watched me, calm, almost bored, and her hand squeezed mine gently. The ice pressed deeper, and my veins felt like frozen glass. I caught myself staring at the window behind her. The streetlights cast light through the glass, reflecting the warm street outside. Inside, everything froze around her. The warmth of the cave, the heat of my own body, even the light, seemed unable to reach her. She was a pocket of cold, a moving shadow that carried winter with her. I thought about excuses, running, leaving, calling someone. But my limbs were heavy, my body locked by the cold, my mind fogged with panic. She leaned slightly closer, and the cold intensified. I realized with a sick twist that it wasn't just her hand. The cold was in her, everywhere she was. It filled the space, seeped into my chest, into my bones, numbing my thoughts, clouding my judgment. She whispered one last time, soft, distant, almost like it wasn't meant for me. She hadn't been warm since her last date. My skin crawled at the thought. Last date. Who was it? What had happened? The words hung in the air like ice. I finally managed to pull back slightly, but even then the cold lingered, an invisible frost crawling over my arms and legs. She didn't flinch. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her expression stayed calm, eyes half-lidded, and I realized with a horror that she had no idea what normal warmth felt like. No idea what living felt like in the human sense. My mind scrambled. I tried to leave, but the streets outside felt wrong. The fog hung heavy, sticking to my skin, chilling me, and I realized it wasn't just the weather. Her cold followed me, invisible but palpable, freezing my chest, numbing my thoughts, slowing my steps. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The cafe was behind me, the candle flickering, the frost along the edges of the table. Her hand had left mine, but the cold lingered like a mark, and I ran, not stopping until the warmth of my apartment wrapped around me like a blanket, until I could feel blood in my fingers again, until I could breathe without the icy grip in my chest. But even then I felt it sometimes. A sudden chill that travels from fingertips to shoulders, a faint whisper in my ear that carries a promise of cold, and I remember that hand, ice cold, that whispered she hadn't been warm since her last date. I noticed it the second I walked into the restaurant. The way his eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking, like he had locked them there and refused to let go. It wasn't intense in the romantic movie sense. It was something heavier, more calculated. I tried to smile, tried to pretend it was charming, but my skin crawled. Still, I sat down. First dates are weird enough without adding obvious red flags into the mix, and I didn't want to make a scene. The place smelled like fried onions and some sweet dessert they were baking in the back. It was dim, cozy, the kind of place where the mirrors were meant to make it feel bigger, but the reflections became a trap instead. Every time I glanced at one, even out of the corner of my eye, I caught something that didn't make sense. At first, it was subtle, a glimpse of movement behind me that vanished when I turned. Shadows in the glass of the bathroom mirror that weren't mine. The guy across the table stayed calm, talking in that low, smooth voice that should have been comforting, but it wasn't. My stomach knotted. I couldn't place why I felt like the walls were closing in, like the mirrors weren't just reflecting light. They were revealing something I wasn't supposed to see. I excused myself to the bathroom, and the first full reflection hit me. His face, right behind me. Perfectly still, eyes wide open, unblinking. The way mirrors warped space sometimes didn't explain it. It didn't matter how I turned, how I moved. Every angle, every reflection showed him standing there. I froze, heart pounding, hands gripping the counter so tight my knuckles went white. I wanted to yell, run, grab someone, but my body refused to obey. He never blinked. I didn't hear him walk, didn't hear any chairs scrape against the floor, didn't hear a door. Just him, always there, always close enough to touch me, always calm. The reflections multiplied as I left the bathroom, back in the dining area. Mirrors lining the walls, polished glass of picture frames, even the tiny reflective surfaces of cutlery. He was there in all of them. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from another table. But there was no one else. No one matched his shape, his clothes, the way his head tilted slightly, just enough to be casual, patient. He followed me silently in every reflection. My hand shook as I picked up the menu. I couldn't read it. The words blurred like the ink was melting, but the reflections didn't blur. They were clear, exact, every detail of his presence magnified by every surface. The way his shoulders relaxed, the slight bend in his knees, the way his face remained expressionless yet somehow judging. I couldn't breathe properly. He gestured to order, and I nodded, barely keeping my eyes on him. He smiled a little, still unblinking, still impossible. The server brought the drinks, and I realized even the condensation on the glass reflected him, towering behind me. My reflection, my body in the glass, and his always there, unchanged, unyielding. The hum of the restaurant faded. Conversations around me dulled into white noise, like they were part of some background soundtrack. It was just us, me, my trembling hands, the water glass, and him in every reflective surface, patient, waiting. I tried to text my friend. My thumbs moved, but every time I glanced at my phone, his reflection appeared behind the screen. I couldn't see the person who had sat at this table. The phone became a mirror itself, showing him, closer now, his presence, somehow heavier, closer, looming in a way that made my stomach turn. I went to the restroom again, needed to be sure, but the reflection was the same. Nothing changed. His face unblinking, cold, calm, and his shadow stretched behind me in a way that made no sense. No light source could cast it like that. I wanted to spin around to confront him, but when I did, there was nothing. Only my own empty reflection staring back, but the glass betrayed me. Every crack of the mirror, every angle, there he was, waiting. The food arrived. I couldn't eat. The silverware reflected him. The polished edge of my plate reflected him. I set my fork down and tried to focus on the tablecloth pattern, the candle flicker, anything to break the hallucination. But the reflections multiplied. Each flame in the candle showed him standing behind me, each gleam in the silverware, each ripple in the water, each shadow in the corners of the room. I wanted to leave. I stood, tried to grab my coat, and my reflection didn't move. My arms raised in panic, but the version of me in the mirror froze, and him, always him, remained standing there. I didn't even see how he got behind me in the reflection. The movement didn't match reality. My body moved, my eyes scanned, but the mirrors and windows and polished surfaces betrayed the truth. He was behind me always, in every possible angle, impossible, unstoppable. I ran to the exit. The hallway lined with glass only confirmed what I feared. His reflection was behind me, closer now, looming in a way that pressed the air down. I opened the door and expected to be free in the street. but the reflection on the glass door still showed him, waiting, unblinking. A cold laugh ran through my chest, silent, unnatural. Outside, the street was normal. People walked past, cars drove by, neon lights blinked. The reflections on shop windows, car mirrors, puddles on the asphalt all showed him standing behind me. I tried to spin around, run, call for help. Every step, every movement, the reflections maintained him. I couldn't escape. I ducked into a convenience store, the fluorescent lights buzzing above. Mirrors, windows, even the glossy magazine covers reflected him. I crouched behind a shelf, pressed my face against the floor, trying to disappear. Every surface, every angle betrayed me. His unblinking stare followed me. Time blurred. Minutes, hours, I couldn't tell. The lights at the store flickered. The shelves seemed taller. The mirrors stretched their reflections until I couldn't distinguish reality from reflection. Every polished surface, every shiny object showed him. And my own reflection, when I found a chance to glance, looked scared. It looked wrong, like a version of me that had been replaced. And behind that scared version, calm, impossible, unblinking, waiting. I slipped out the back, thinking maybe the alley would break the pattern. Brick walls, garbage cans, puddles, broken glass. Reflections in puddles, windows at the end of the alley, a small shiny pipe near the dumpster. He was there in all of them. I stumbled, pressed myself against the wall, hands over my eyes. When I peeked, his reflection was not a trick. He wasn't moving, but he was there. Always there. Closer now, taller, patient, waiting for me to acknowledge him. Hours passed. The night grew colder, the city quieter. Streetlights flickered, neon signs buzzed. And no matter where I went, every reflective surface betrayed the same truth. He never blinked. He was always behind me. Patient, calm, unrelenting. It didn't matter where I turned, where I ran, what time it was. The reflections never lied. I don't know how long I kept moving. Eventually, I found myself back at the street where the restaurant was. Lights dim, windows dark, but mirrors and glass surfaces in every shop. Every car, every puddle showed him. Unblinking, calm, watching. I didn't dare enter the restaurant again. I didn't dare look up from the street. The last thing I remember before my legs gave out was a puddle on the curb. I glanced down, expecting just water. Instead, his face hovered above my reflection. Perfect, unblinking, calm, waiting. I turned, sprinted into the shadows of the alley, and never looked back, but I know it doesn't matter. I can see him in every mirror, every glass surface, every reflective angle. And I know he's still standing there behind me, unblinking, patient, inevitable. I walked into the little cafe thinking it was just another normal night. The kind of night you tell yourself is going to be simple. Small table near the window, coffee smells, the faint hum of chatter. But the moment I saw him sitting there, my chest hitched. Not because he was late or anything, but because he looked familiar. Not in a casual, hey, I've seen you before way. More like I was staring at someone I'd known my entire life and had somehow forgotten. He waved calm, like he'd been expecting me. I slid into the chair across from him, trying to make my hand stop shaking. And that's when she said it. She meeting me, meeting the version of me that had apparently already been here before. She said this is our third first date, and asked him to please remember this time. The words hit my ears in the wrong way, twisting themselves around my brain until I couldn't figure out which me was actually here, which me was speaking. The cafe smelled like burnt sugar and espresso, the kind that sticks to the back of your throat and lingers in your nose. He smiled, polite, calm, like he knew I had just said something absurd and dangerous, like he was waiting for it. The chairs squeaked when we shifted. The dishes clinking from the counter made little echoes that sounded like distant voices whispering. I tried to laugh, tried to brush it off. But every time I opened my mouth, my own words felt borrowed, like someone else had spoken them and I was just hearing an echo. He asked if I wanted something to drink, and I nodded, but when the server brought the coffee, it was exactly how I liked it, with almond milk, 2 sugars, and a little foam art in the shape of a tree. I hadn't ordered it. I hadn't even mentioned it. It was like he had been sitting here, somewhere outside of time, memorizing me, every little preference, every little movement. We talked, we laughed, And somewhere in between a conversation about mundane work stuff and the latest show on streaming, I realized the cafe was getting quieter. The clinks and hums dimmed, like the world itself had noticed the wrongness of this moment. The other patrons seemed to blur into the background, their faces melting into anonymity. And every time I looked at him, I had the sense that he was older than he looked. Not physically, not in a normal way, but in the sense of knowing too much, waiting too long, being patient like something that had all the time in the world and had been here before. I tried to leave my mind to focus on the present, but my hands kept catching little hints, little flashes. A shadow in the corner of my eye that looked exactly like me, sitting at a table in the exact same position, watching us. The coffee cup looked too familiar, the pattern of the foam too precise. Even the way his hand rested near the edge of the table felt like it had been staged, rehearsed for some performance I didn't know I was part of. Then came the realization. It wasn't just the words she had spoken. The me who had said this was the third first date. It was everything else. The smell, the sound, the weight of time pressing against the walls of this small cafe. It was like I had lived this before exactly, and I had forgotten. And somehow he remembered. He always remembered. My stomach tightened as I tried to laugh again, a hollow, nervous thing. He tilted his head slightly, calm, like he had seen me unravel before and would watch it again patiently. My fingers toyed with the edge of the table, tracing cracks that seemed to appear as I ran my hand over them, as if the cafe itself was responding to me, reacting to my panic, stretching time and space around this impossible familiarity. I didn't know how long we sat there. Minutes, hours, days, it didn't matter. The world outside the window was muted. The people walking past seemed slowed down, trapped in some loop I wasn't allowed to escape. Every time I tried to remember what I had done before, the memory slipped away, leaving only a faint echo of laughter, a smell of coffee, and the insistent weight of him across from me. He poured sugar into his coffee without asking, just like I did once in another version of this night. The sugar fell and hit the cup in a tiny rhythm that my mind recognized instantly, like a song I had heard only in dreams, one I couldn't remember the lyrics to, but knew I had sung before. It was enough to make my pulse spike. Then she spoke again, meeting another me. Third first date, remember this time. And it hit me like a punch. I had been here before. Not once, not twice, but exactly this way. I had laughed. I had spilled coffee. I had tried to leave. Each time I had failed to notice the subtle signals, the pattern repeating itself, the precise choreography of the cave, the coffee, him. Every first date that wasn't first, every memory that wasn't mine, all folding over each other like paper cranes in a line, fragile but unbreakable. He smiled then, calm, patient, knowing. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The knowledge in his eyes said everything. He remembered, he always remembered, he was waiting. He had been waiting, and somehow he always knew which version of me would arrive next. The waiter passed, his steps quiet, careful. He didn't look at us, didn't ask questions, but left a receipt. I glanced down. The numbers, the scribbles, the date. It was today, but something off about it. The numbers shifted like they were trying to catch up to some time I wasn't aware of. I folded it back into my hand, felt its weight, and realized it was just another reminder that this night wasn't unique. It never was. And every attempt I made to make it unique failed because he had already been here, always knowing, remembering. I wanted to leave. My heart hammered against my chest as I tried to stand, but my legs felt like they were stuck in wet cement. He reached out lightly, placing a hand near mine, not touching, just close enough to remind me of the boundary, the distance, the control he had. The calm patience in his posture, the faint twitch of a smile at the corner of his lips, made my stomach twist. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I realized then that there was no escaping this loop. I could get up. I could walk away. I could pretend this was normal, but the calf, the air, the smell of coffee, the cracked leather of the chair, the flicker of the light above, all would bring me back. He would bring me back. Each first date that wasn't first, each coffee that was poured just so, each minute that repeated without fail. The sky outside darkened, streetlights flickered, the world outside the window moved on without me. And I sat there, across from him, third first date, feeling the impossible weight of time pressing down, remembering nothing except the one command that echoed in my mind, the voice that wasn't quite me, wasn't quite memory. Remember this time. I drank the coffee, too familiar and too perfect. He watched, patient, unblinking. The laughter came, awkward, hollow. My hands gripped the cup tighter. Each sip was a reminder that I had done this before, that I would do it again, and that the small cave, the cracked tiles, the smell of burnt sugar, the quiet hum of the lights, and him, always him, would wait for me, always ready, always patient, always remembering. Eventually, the night ended, or seemed to. The lights dimmed. The other patrons vanished into shadows. The street outside darkened further. I stood, trying to leave, but the exit door swung open like a slow-motion echo of past escapes, like it had always been waiting for me. He didn't follow, didn't block, didn't speak. The loop was mine, not his, but the memory of the third first date clung to my skin, to my chest, to the rhythm of my heart, impossible to shake. I walked out into the night alone, but carrying the weight of all the first dates that weren't first. The air smelled cold, the pavement slick, and the lights from the cafe flickered behind me like eyes watching. I tried to forget, but each step echoed the command, the warning, the plea, remember this time. And somewhere inside the quiet of the city, I knew I would. I had no choice. He would always be waiting for the next version of me, and I would always arrive, third, fourth, fifth, first again, always. The night swallowed me, and the echo of the cave, the coffee, the smell, the patience, and his eyes followed me, patient and inevitable. I didn't expect the night to feel like it was alive. From the moment I agreed to meet him at that tiny diner on the edge of town, I had an uneasy energy in my stomach, like the universe had nudged me with one finger and whispered, "This is not normal." The diner itself was an old one, neon sign flickering and buzzing, parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds. I had driven past it countless times, but never stopped. Somehow the choice to go there felt right, like a scene from a movie I wasn't supposed to be in yet. He was waiting inside a booth near the back, the kind of booth where the leather was cracked and the springs poked up in one corner. He waved when he saw me, casual, like we'd been planning this for months. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. There was something off, subtle, in the way he watched me as I slid in across from him. Not curious, not nervous, not like a normal first date thing, more like calculation. The diner smelled like burnt toast and fryer oil, but it was quiet, quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The usual chatter of other patrons was absent, replaced by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional clang from the kitchen. I told myself it was fine, just nerves, but my hands felt sticky on the laminated table. We ordered food, small talk, the usual first date nonsense. I tried to focus on him, on his stories, his laugh, anything normal. He laughed too, a low, even sound, but I felt like the sound was directed more on me than the moment, like it was designed to distract. Then his phone rang. It vibrated across the table, buzzing like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. He picked it up casually, glanced at the screen, and handed it to me. Something about the gesture was off, casual but loaded. The screen lit up with my own number. I froze, stomach lurching, and took the phone. Curiosity mingled with panic. When I answered, the voice that came through made my blood run cold. It was me, my voice trembling and urgent, whispering into the receiver, begging me not to stay. The diner seemed to fold in around me. The flickering neon outside cast shadows that moved like living things across the floor. The other patrons were still there, silent, eating and drinking, but none looked at us. It was like the world had paused, holding its breath, watching what I would do next. My hands shook, but I held the phone tighter. My own voice continued, sounding scared, pleading, and every word was precise, right down to the little pauses that I recognized too well. Words that no one should know unless they were listening to my private thoughts, my secret fears. And the worst part was that it felt like the voice was coming from inside me, not just the phone, like the room itself had decided to speak. He leaned back in his booth, calm, his eyes on me. Not alarmed, not surprised, just watching. Like he had orchestrated this. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. I tried to say something, anything, but my voice wouldn't work. The voice on the phone kept talking, and each time it spoke, I felt a tightening in my chest, a thread wrapping around my ribs. The hum of the lights became louder, sharper, more insistent. I could hear the buzz of the neon outside in my ears. Everything felt amplified. The air smelled like ozone, like a storm was breaking the diner itself. My hair felt prickly on my arms, my skin tight. The words on the phone were cutting through my mind, stitching themselves into my memory. Not just words, but warnings, impossible knowledge of what I might do, of what I was about to choose. I looked at him, trying to find some normal human reaction, something that would anchor me back to reality. But he didn't blink, didn't flinch. Just sat there, calm and steady, like a rock in a storm I didn't understand. My chest heaved. The phone slipped from my fingers to the table, ringing softly but still playing my voice. Each repetition felt like an echo inside my skull. I got up suddenly, neatly hitting me like a physical shove. He didn't move. The booth didn't move. The diner didn't change. My feet hit the cracked tiles, each step echoing in the silent room. My eyes flicked to the windows, to the neon, to the empty booths, to the kitchen where the cook continued flipping burgers as if nothing had happened. And yet the voice kept coming from the phone. My voice, pleading, knowing, warning. I tried to throw the phone away. It landed on the floor and bounced once, but the voice didn't stop. Louder now, sharper, more precise. It wasn't just words. It was fear. My fear. Every secret, every buried thought, every instinct warning me to run. It was all coming through, and he didn't move, just watched. I realized then that he had been waiting for this. Not for the date, not for the conversation, not even for me to enjoy a meal. He had been waiting for me to be confronted with myself in a way I couldn't resist, couldn't deny, and I had walked right into it. The din of fluorescent lights reached a peak, the neon outside stuttering violently. The cook glanced up briefly, not at me, not at him, just glanced, as if acknowledging that something was happening, but choosing not to intervene. I ran my hands over my face, trying to ground myself, trying to remind myself I was real, that the diner was real, that this man wasn't a ghost or a demon or some reflection of my own insanity. But the phone still rang. The ringing was like a heartbeat, like my own voice beating against me, screaming that leaving was necessary, that staying was wrong. I didn't know how long I stood there frozen, trembling. Every instinct told me to run, every part of me screaming that this was a trap, and yet my legs barely moved. The man in the booth, calm as ever, made no move to stop me. Just sat, just waited. The contrast made my panic rise higher. Finally, I grabbed the phone and smashed it against the counter hard. The ringing stopped. Silence slammed into the diner like a physical blow. My ears rang, my chest ached, my skin hot. I could barely breathe. He smiled then, just slightly, and that smile was a weight pressing down on my chest. The smile said he had known all along, that he had orchestrated it, that he had made me listen to myself, to fear myself, to be confronted with the worst possible version of the night, and that he had done it without moving a muscle. I left. The night outside was dark, empty, and strangely still. The neon buzzed faintly. My hands shook. I didn't look back. I didn't hear footsteps. The diner faded behind me, the distorted memory of my own voice ringing in my ears. I still can't hear my own voice in recordings. The sound is wrong now, like it carries another weight, a warning. Every phone call, every ringing sound, triggers the memory. The man, the diner, the voice. The voice that was me telling me to run and me standing there anyway. Years later, I can recall it as vividly as if it happened yesterday. The smell of the fryer, the crack in the vinyl, the neon flicker, his calm watchfulness, the ringing. All of it etched into my bones. And the thing that terrifies me the most isn't what he did, but that he didn't have to. The fear, the warning, the confrontation with myself, it all came from inside me. He just made sure I noticed it. I never called that diner again. I never answered unknown numbers. The ringing, though, it stays with me. Every time my phone buzzes in my pocket, I feel that same heartbeat in my ears, that same panic. And every time I think of him, calm, watching, waiting, knowing. I never thought a first date could feel like stepping into a trap, but that night it did. The moment I met her outside that tiny bar, the kind with flickering lights and a smell of old wood mixed with spilt beer, I felt something off. She smiled in a way that seemed warm, but it was the kind of smile that made you hold your chest like it might stop beating any second. I didn't know it then, but that smile was the first warning. Inside, the bar was dim and smelled like cigarettes and coffee that had been reheated too many times. The kind of place that looked cozy from the outside, but made your skin crawl when you realized the corners were full of shadows. She chose a booth against the wall, the one with cracked vinyl seats and a wobbly table, and I sat down across from her, trying to act casual. I wanted to impress her. I didn't want to scare her off, even though inside my stomach was already twisting. We ordered drinks. The bartender was a young guy, quiet, with an expression like he'd seen too much and stopped caring. She let me pick my drink first, watched me with these eyes that seemed to drill into the back of my skull. Then she asked me the question that made my chest freeze, made me forget what I'd ordered. What would I do if she died tonight? I froze, trying to process it. The question made no sense in the context of a first date. It was surreal, terrifying, like someone had paused reality for a moment and inserted this thought just to see me squirm. My hands were shaking slightly on the table. I tried to respond, to answer something normal, something that didn't make her see that I was scared, but the words stuck in my throat. She leaned back, her fingers tracing the edge of the table like she was bored. Then she ordered my drink for me. Didn't ask, didn't offer, just did it. Named my favorite cocktail, the one I didn't even mention, and nodded to the bartender. I watched as he made it silently. The motion felt rehearsed. The way she smiled at me while doing it, almost smug, made my stomach drop. It was like she already knew everything about me, like she had mapped out my life without me saying a word. The drink arrived, perfect, ice clinking in the glass. I picked it up, tried to drink, but the taste was bitter sharp. She watched me swallow, her eyes never leaving mine. There was a weight in that gaze, heavy and oppressive, like she was measuring something I didn't understand. My throat tightened. I tried to steer the conversation toward normal topics. Work, music, movies, stupid questions people ask on first dates, she answered, but her answers didn't feel human. They were precise, almost rehearsed. Then she would laugh, soft and low, and I could feel the weight in the room shift. The shadows seemed to deepen. My eyes flicked to the other booths, and for the first time, I noticed the reflection in the window. The dim streetlight outside barely illuminated the glass, but I could see her reflection laughing. Except it didn't match her movements. Her lips were mouthing words I couldn't hear. Warning, maybe. I tried to blink and focus, but it vanished when I looked directly at it. I realized I was trembling slightly. My hands on the table were cold. My mind was racing. I tried to ask her about something normal, about her favorite movie, anything that would ground the night. She answered, her voice soft, melodic, like she was singing a song I hadn't learned yet. And then she touched the table lightly, the same hand that ordered my drink, and leaned in just slightly. The thing that got me most wasn't what she said, or what she didn't say. It was that she knew. She knew every little preference, every minor quirk about me. My favorite cocktail, the exact way I held my fork, the way I stirred sugar into coffee. It wasn't casual observation. It wasn't even familiarity. It was obsession. Premeditated knowledge, like she had been tracking me, reading everything about me, cataloging it until she knew exactly how to manipulate my night, my perception, my fear. As we talked, I tried to laugh, tried to act normal, but every laugh felt forced. Every word I said felt like I was walking on cracked glass. She smiled, still calm, still in control, and I realized that whatever game she was playing, she had already won. The bartender kept glancing our way, subtle, almost imperceptible, like he was nervous. I tried to meet his eyes, but he would look away, pretending nothing was wrong. I felt trapped in that booth, in that bar, in that night, like the walls had closed in without me noticing. And then she asked again. Not about my life, not about trivial things. She asked what I'd do if she died tonight. Again, this time softer, closer to my ear. The question wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't about curiosity. It was about control, testing me, measuring how I would react. I tried to answer, tried to deflect with humor, tried to smile and sip my drink. But my voice was tight. My fingers fumbled with the glass. I felt sweat gather at the back of my neck. She took my hand, holding it gently but firmly. The same hand that had ordered my drink. The gesture should have been comforting, human, but it felt like chains. The touch pressed in a way that left me no escape. My mind raced with scenarios, the absurdity of it all, the fear mixing with disbelief. Was she joking? Insane? Prepared? I couldn't decide. Every rational thought fell apart in the face of the quiet, calculated intensity in her eyes. Time warped. Minutes stretched. Each second felt like an eternity. Every clink of glass, every footstep outside the bar, every distant laugh of strangers felt magnified. I could feel the pulse in my ears, my heartbeat pounding like a drum in my chest. I tried to drink again. The cocktail was sweet, sharp, too perfect. She had chosen it for me knowing exactly what I liked, exactly what would make me pause. It was a gift and a threat all at once. I kept scanning the room looking for anyone else, anyone who might notice, but the patrons were oblivious, lost in their own worlds. Except for her, calm and steady, observing me. The power dynamic was so obvious, I could feel it press down on me. Like gravity had shifted just for the two of us. I wanted to leave. The urge was desperate, physical, but something in her kept me seated. Some magnet, some weight, some invisible chain. I couldn't move without feeling like I was stepping into some unknown consequence. She knew it. She could feel my hesitation, my rising panic. As the night stretched, her questions became subtler. Not just about death, but about what I feared, what I loved, what I would risk. She knew, she already knew, and she laughed softly, brushing my hand again, guiding the conversation, ordering my next drink without asking. I drank, trembling, feeling the control she had over the night, over me, and the impossibility of escape. We eventually left the bar, walking outside. The cold air hit my face like a slap. I breathed in, trying to feel grounded. Streetlights stretched shadows across the pavement. She walked beside me, calm, collected, like nothing had happened, like the night had been normal. I knew it wasn't normal. I knew what had happened in that booth, what had been done to me without words, without force. A cocktail, a question, a touch, a simple order of a drink. The street seemed wide, safe, open, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the control, the calculation, the knowledge she had was still with me, trailing me, waiting, embedded in the memory of my body, in the tension that lingered in a heartbeat I couldn't calm. I never saw her again, but I remember that night vividly. The bar, the booth, the drink she ordered, the question she asked, and the silent weight of someone who knows more about you than you know about yourself. Even now, years later, I can't drink that cocktail without remembering. I can't hear the question without flinching. The fear wasn't physical. It wasn't immediate. It was a presence, a calculation, a control that was simple, elegant, and terrifying. I always thought first dates were predictable. You meet someone, you talk, you figure out if there's chemistry, and if not, you politely disappear into your separate lives. But this date, it wasn't predictable. It didn't follow any rules I knew, and looking back, it didn't follow any rules that made sense at all. We met at a little diner off a side street that wasn't on any main map. It had a faded neon sign that buzzed quietly, windows clouded with condensation, and booths that had clearly survived 100 late nights. The kind of place where people could hide without noticing, where time felt slower, warmer, familiar. I liked it. It felt like an easy place to talk. Nothing fancy, nothing intimidating. He was already seated when I got there, leaning back in a cracked leather booth, casually scrolling on his phone, completely calm. There was this tiny flicker of amusement in his eyes when he looked up and saw me, the kind of look that makes you feel like someone's reading you without even trying. I didn't think much of it at first. First impressions can be deceiving. We ordered. Nothing fancy. 2 coffees, some eggs, a plate of hash browns. The food came quick, served with a polite nod by a server who moved efficiently, like they'd done this 1,000 times. The diner hummed with background noise, quiet chatter, the clink of cutlery, a low hiss of the coffee machine. Everything normal. And then I noticed them, the couple at the next table. At first, I thought it was just a trick of my tired eyes. A glance, a shadow. But they didn't look like anyone I'd seen before. They looked like us. Exactly like us. Older. Older in ways that I didn't know was possible. Hair thinner, eyes heavier, skin lined in places mine wasn't yet. The same positions we sat in. The same gestures. Their hands curled around coffee cups the way ours did. He had the same expression he always had when he was pretending to listen but wasn't. I was frozen. I watched them quietly, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. It couldn't be. They were us. The diner felt suddenly smaller. The hum of conversation seemed to dim. My pulse picked up. Every tiny sound, cutlery, cups, the low mutter of voices, felt like it was echoing, stretching the moment. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Every detail matched. The way he twirled his fork. The way I rested my chin on my hand. Mirrored. And then I noticed their heads. They were shaking them slowly, almost imperceptibly, silently. No words, just shaking like a warning, like regret, exhaustion, like they had seen too much of something I wasn't ready to see. He didn't notice them at first. He was laughing at something I said, leaning forward, his hand brushing mine across the table. I wanted to reach over and warn him. Wanted to grab him and run out. My stomach twisted. The older versions of us weren't hostile. They weren't angry. Just tired. Broken in ways I couldn't understand. I tried to focus on him, tried to shake the fear, tell myself I was imagining things, but the longer I looked, the more details emerged. The hairline, the curve of the jaw, the way his eyebrows lifted when he smiled. It was identical. Every line, every small flaw, every movement. Mirrored. And they didn't move. They didn't acknowledge anyone else in the diner. Just sat there, silently shaking their heads at us, warning us, pleading. I wanted to get up, scream, leave, say something. But my body wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't move. My hands were stiff on the table. My chest burned. I felt like someone had pressed on my ribs from the inside. He noticed my distraction, leaned over, whispered something in my ear. I nodded, half smiling, pretending to listen. I couldn't tell him. Couldn't explain what I was seeing. If I did, he would think I was crazy. I would sound insane. I tried looking away, but I kept catching glimpses. When he reached for his coffee, they reached for theirs in the exact same motion. When I tilted my head to laugh at something he said, it mirrored it. Every tiny gesture matched ours perfectly. Time started feeling strange, like it was looping, folding in on itself. I could feel a tension building, like I was straining to look at them without blinking, without moving, trying to memorize the exact moment before it shifted again. The diner around us blurred. The background noise faded. People moved in slow motion, or maybe not at all. The focus was only us, the present us, and the older us at the next table, shaking their heads, silently warning. I wanted to ask him if he noticed, wanted to grab his arm and insist, but the words wouldn't form. Fear clamped down in my throat, locked my mouth. I didn't know if they were a warning, a prediction, a memory, or something else entirely. He reached across, brushing my hand. Normal gesture. Safe. Human. But the older couple mirrored it. Mirrored our movements. Mirrored the comfort. But their expressions were heavy with something I couldn't name. Something I didn't want to name. I tried to eat, forced myself to take a bite of the hash browns. Tasted like cardboard. Coffee burned my tongue. The older versions of us didn't eat. They just watched. Shook their heads slowly. Every sound the diner made felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the squeak of a chair, the bell on the door. Everything pulled my attention back to them. The mirror versions of us. Warning. Exhausted. Helpless. Pleading. I considered leaving, storming out. But where would I go? How would I explain it? The older us didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't signal where to go. Just shook their heads. I tried talking to him about normal things, anything to distract from it. The weather. Music. Trivial complaints. Laughter. But every time I smiled, I caught the older versions of us at the next table. They mirrored it. Mirrored us perfectly, but the weight in their eyes didn't laugh. And then it hit me. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a trick of the eyes. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't coincidence. It was the two of us. Some possible version of us in the future, sitting here, silently shaking our heads, exhausted by choices made by time past, by things we couldn't yet understand. The thought made my stomach twist. I realized that this wasn't just observation. It was prophecy. Warning, a premonition of what we could become. We left eventually. I didn't want to look back, but I did. The diner's neon buzzed, lights flickering. The older couple was still there, still watching, still shaking their heads. Outside, I felt the cool air hit my face, tried to ground myself. The streets were normal. People walked by. Traffic moved. The world moved on, but I couldn't shake it. I knew we weren't free from that. Not yet. We walked silently for blocks. Every time he touched my hand, I flinched, half expecting to see our older versions mirrored somewhere in a reflection, in a window, in a puddle. And I knew without understanding how that the diner, the older us, the shaking heads, it wasn't just a trick. It was a warning, a glimpse of something we could not yet comprehend. Years later, I still remember that diner, the smell of the coffee, the hum of the fridge, the quiet, exhausted shaking of the heads at the next table. And I know somewhere in the back of my mind that no matter what happens, those versions of us are still out there, watching, waiting, silently shaking their heads at the choices we might make. I always thought first dates were supposed to be awkward in funny ways, fumbling with menus, spilling drinks, running out of things to say. But this one was different. The kind of different that leaves your stomach buzzing long after your heart stops racing from excitement and shifts into a cold, heavy dread you can't shake. We met at a tiny cafe tucked between a thrift shop and a comic book store. The place had that mismatched charm, tables all slightly wobbly, chairs of different colors, the walls plastered with old magazine covers and weird art. I liked the vibe. It felt casual, safe, public enough that nothing could get too serious too fast. He got there first, of course, and I watched him from the sidewalk before I went in. He was leaning against the wall like he owned the place, not impatient, just confident. The kind of calm that makes you feel like they already know how the night is going to go. I pushed that thought aside because I didn't know him, and I didn't want to feel stupid for noticing it. We started with coffee, grabbed a corner table near a window, and ordered a few pastries to share. The conversation was easy at first. Superficial things like favorite movies, favorite places to eat, music we liked, stupid little complaints about the city. Nothing remarkable. The kind of chatter that's supposed to fill silence comfortably. Then the server came. She moved around the cafe like she knew everyone, sliding between tables with a calm, practiced ease. She stopped at our table and handed him a receipt, just placed it in front of him like it was routine. I noticed immediately that he blinked at it, glanced at the date, paused. It wasn't like she handed him the wrong change or a menu. It was a receipt. But the date on it, it was 10 years in the future. 10 years. Not next week, not next month, not even next year. 10 years. He flipped it over, looked at the total, then back at the date. I leaned in trying to see it without making it obvious, and my chest went tight. The receipt had his name on it, and someone had crossed it out, not with a pen, but like it was etched there, deliberate, permanent, a gesture meant to erase him. He didn't freak out, didn't shout, didn't throw the receipt. He just sat there, calm, studying it like it was a complicated puzzle he already kind of expected. He put it down slowly, right next to his coffee, and continued talking to me like nothing had happened. I couldn't focus on him anymore. My eyes kept drifting back to the little slip of paper, the future, the erasure, the total bill, the coffee, the date, all of it, a casual proof that someone, or something, knew him, knew me, knew this night before it even happened. I tried to laugh, tried to shake it off as coincidence. Maybe a prank. Some weird glitch in the cave's register system. Maybe he had friends in the future who were messing with him. But the line crossing of his name was deliberate, clear, and unnerving. We ordered more food. I didn't even taste it. He seemed unfazed, talking about movies he wanted to see, books he'd read, places he wanted to go. I kept sneaking glances at the receipt. The server passed by again, smiling at us like nothing had happened. I realized she hadn't acknowledged a receipt at all. It was like handing it to him was routine for her, like it was part of some hidden ritual I didn't know the rules for. He picked up a fork, cut into his pastry, smiled at me, and for a second, I wanted to believe I imagined the receipt entirely. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Maybe he was joking and had placed it there to mess with me. But the weight of it lingered in the air like smoke. I asked him about it without actually asking. Tried to see his reaction. He didn't flinch. Didn't fluster. He just mentioned that sometimes old receipts get printed with wrong dates and shrugged. Easy. Casual. Like that explained the impossible thing in front of me. But it didn't. Not really. I saw the subtle tension in his jaw. A fraction of hesitation. Just enough that I could tell he knew something I didn't. The rest of the night moved in this haze. We walked around the block after paying, the receipt tucked in his coat pocket. I tried to distract myself, focused on the street, the light from the lamps, the sound of cars passing, people laughing on the sidewalk. I wanted normal. I wanted human. But every time I looked at him, I imagined what the receipt meant. 10 years from now, his name erased, and somehow, inexplicably, this moment was connected to it. I wanted to leave. Part of me wanted to scream at him to demand answers. Part of me wanted to run back to my apartment and lock the door forever. But the other part, the stupid, curious part, kept walking, kept talking, kept pretending that nothing had happened. We ended up sitting on a bench in a small park near the river. The city lights reflected off the water, everything sparkling and mundane. I forced myself to look at it, the calm scene, the couple of joggers, the distant honking. He pulled the receipt out again casually, held it between his fingers, and I couldn't stop staring. He didn't check the total, didn't try and hide it, didn't even seem nervous. He just ran his thumb over the crossed-out name like he was acknowledging it, maybe accepting it. I tried to speak, to ask him about it again, but the words died in my throat. My fingers were cold, my stomach tight. He smiled at me and leaned back, shifting as if the night was still just a date and the receipt was nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I kept seeing the receipt in my mind. The future, his erased name, my presence there, like a witness to something I shouldn't have been. The next day, I thought maybe it was gone, a dream, a weird coincidence. But then I checked his texts. Nothing about it. His phone wasn't cracked, no weird apps. Nothing. I asked him about it the following week. He didn't answer directly. He just said he didn't want to joke about that. And I knew he meant the night, the receipt, the crossing out. I never saw the receipt again. Never got an explanation. Never understood if it was a prank, a glitch, or something worse. But the memory sits in my head, like a mark, like someone wrote a warning 10 years in advance, and I was the first person to notice it. It changed everything. I never looked at him the same way again. Never sat in a cafe without scanning receipts, menus, servers, trying to find something normal that made sense. Sometimes I imagine 10 years from now, I imagine walking into a cafe, ordering a coffee, and seeing my name crossed out. Like a ghost of a date I never wanted, a reminder that someone always knows. The night ended. The date ended. We went home. Everything seemed normal. But the receipt, the future, that part of it never left. I knew the night was going to stick to me the second he said it, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it slid into the conversation like it belonged there, like it was just another detail, no different than talking about traffic or bad coffee. My body reacted before my brain did. My stomach dropped. My shoulders tensed. I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when your brain is trying to catch up. We met at a rooftop taco place above a parking garage. Plastic chairs, chipped tables, heaters that barely worked. You could see the whole city from up there, lights blinking like nothing bad ever happens. I liked that it felt open. Nowhere to get cornered. Wind in my hair. People everywhere. He showed up on time, which I noticed right away. Clean jacket. Calm smile. Not nervous. Not overly confident. Just comfortable. That should have been fine. It should have been a green flag. Instead, it felt like watching someone walk into a room they already knew. We ordered food and sat near the edge, feet hooked around the chair legs so they wouldn't slide. The conversation flowed easily. Too easily. No awkward pauses. No scrambling for topics. He remembered little things I mentioned in messages weeks ago. The kind of stuff people usually forget. I told myself it was refreshing. I told myself I was being dramatic for even noticing. The city noise filled the gaps. Cars below. Sirens far away. Laughter from another table. Everything felt normal enough that I let my guard down a little. He leaned back and talked about his week. I watched his hands while he talked. Steady. Relaxed. He didn't fidget. He didn't check his phone. He looked at me the whole time like I was the only thing worth focusing on. Somewhere between the second taco and the last of my drink, the topic drifted to apartments, rent prices, bad neighbors, thin walls. I complained about my building, the old lock that sometimes stuck if you did turn it just right. I laughed about it, because that's what you do with stuff that annoys you but hasn't hurt you yet. That's when he mentioned the key. Not asked about it. Not reacted with concern. Just mentioned it. He said how easy it was to get a key made for my apartment. My brain stalled. The words were played in slow motion, trying to rearrange themselves into something harmless. Maybe he meant in general. Maybe he meant his old place. Maybe I misheard over the wind. I looked at him, still smiling, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. He kept talking, completely unfazed. Mentioned the hardware store near my place. Said they'd never ask questions. Said it only cost a few dollars. Said it was faster than they expected. My mouth felt dry. My heart started beating hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. I laughed weakly, hoping he would realize how weird that sounded and backtrack. He didn't. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table, and continued like this was common ground, like we were sharing a tip. He said he figured it out after noticing the brand of lock on my door. I don't remember the rest of that sentence. My mind snagged on that part and refused to let go. My door. I had never told him my address. Not directly. Not even jokingly. I had mentioned the neighborhood once. A general area. Lots of people live there. That didn't narrow it down. I scanned his face for a sign that this was a joke gone wrong. There was nothing. No smirk. No tension. Just calm. I asked how he knew what lock I had without using words. My face must have shown something because he tilted his head slightly, like he was confused why I was confused. He mentioned seeing it when he walked me home. That didn't make sense. He had never walked me home. We had never met before tonight. This was the first date. I told myself he meant he walked by. Same street. Coincidence. But my chest felt tight. My hands felt cold. I asked myself if I had posted a photo online that showed my door. I scrolled through my memory fast. Selfies. Pet photos. Nothing like that. The wind picked up and rattled the heater. The city lights blurred slightly as my eyes watered. I blinked hard and focused on the table, the chipped paint, the grease-stained shape like a star. He noticed my mood shift and softened his expression. Leaned back again. Said he didn't mean to freak me out. Said he was just saying how easy it was in general. But then he added something that made my stomach twist. He said he thought it was smart to have a spare. My chest felt hollow. I couldn't feel my legs. I imagined my apartment door, the way it stuck, the sound it made when it finally turned, the feeling of safety when it clicked shut behind me. I imagined that sound meaning nothing. I tried to stand up. My legs shook but held. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder. The chair scraped loud against the concrete. People glanced over and then looked away. He stood too, slower than me, not rushed, not alarmed. I told him I was feeling well without explaining. I said I needed to go. I said sorry because that's what I always say, even when I'm scared. He nodded like he expected that, like this was a normal next step. We walked toward the stairs together. I stayed a step ahead of him. My skin crawled with the awareness of his presence behind me. Every footstep echoed too loud. Halfway down, he mentioned something else. His voice floated up casually, carried by the open stairwell. He said he had already labeled the key. I stopped walking. The concrete felt cold under my feet. The railing pressed into my palm. My breath came out shaky. Labeled. I turned slowly and looked at him. He was a few steps up, hands in his pockets, watching me patiently. He explained that he didn't want to mix it up with his other ones, said he had learned that lesson before. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. My thoughts raced in circles. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to rewind the night and stay home with my half lemon and old takeout. I didn't say anything. I couldn't trust my voice. I walked down the rest of the stairs fast, almost tripping. I pushed through the door at the bottom and stepped out onto the street. The cool air hit my face like a slap. Traffic rushed by. People walked past. The world kept moving. He followed me out, but stopped a few feet away, giving me space like he was being respectful. Like that erased everything he had just said. I told him goodbye without stopping. I walked toward the bus stop even though it wasn't my route. I just needed distance. I felt him watching me until I turned the corner. On the ride home, my phone buzzed. A message from him. I didn't open it. I stared at the reflection of my face in the bus window instead. I looked pale. Older, like someone who had learned something they couldn't unlearn. When I got to my building, I stood across the street for a long time, watching the door, watching people go in and out. Every time it opened, my heart jumped. Eventually, I crossed over and went inside. The hallway smelled the same as always. Cleaning solution and old carpet. My footsteps echoed. My door looked normal, untouched. I unlocked it slowly. The lock stuck like usual. For a split second, relief washed over me. Then the door opened too easily. I froze. Inside, everything looked the same. Nothing out of place. No lights on, no sounds. I locked the door behind me and slid down against it, my hands shaking so hard I had to sit on them. Later, after I calmed down enough to think, I checked my phone. The message was still there. It was a photo. A key on a table. My key. With a small white tag. My address written on it. I didn't sleep in my live that night. I keep replaying the moment like maybe I missed something important right before it happened. Like there was a warning sign I ignored because I was too busy trying to look normal. The truth is, the night felt easy at first, suspiciously easy. The kind of easy that makes you lower your guard without realizing it. And then it snapped, all at once, right around a laugh that wasn't even that loud. We met at a late-night dessert cafe downtown, the kind that stays open because people like sitting somewhere when they don't want to go home yet. Big windows, tiny tables, soft music playing too low to notice. It was packed in that loose way where every seat is taken, but no one feels crowded. And like that, it felt safe, public, normal. She was already there, sitting in a corner table with her phone face down and both hands wrapped around a mug like she was warming up from the inside. When she looked up and smiled, it felt real. Not practiced, not sharp, just a normal smile. I remember thinking I could actually relax. We talked for a while about dumb stuff, school stories, bad jobs, things that didn't matter. She laughed easily, the kind of laugh that pulls you in without trying. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel fake. Everything about her felt grounded. I noticed the room mostly because I always do. I clock exits, bathrooms, people near us. Not because I'm paranoid, just habit. The cafe had this low, steady noise to it. Spoons clinking, chairs scraping, quiet conversations overlapping into a soft blur. At some point, I made a dumb comment. Not edgy, not mean, just something self-deprecating. She laughed harder than before, leaning forward slightly, covering her mouth with her hand. Her laugh cut through the noise like a ripple. And then the room went silent. Not gradually, not awkwardly, instantly. Every sound dropped out like someone had muted the world. No music, no chatter, no clinking. Just quiet so thick it pressed against my ears. I froze mid-breath. She was still smiling, still laughing a little under her breath like nothing had changed. I looked around. Every single person in the cafe had turned to look at me. Not at us, not at her, at me. Their expressions weren't angry. They were shocked. They were disappointed, tired, like they were seeing something they had already seen too many times, like I had just crossed a line everyone else knew not to. My stomach dropped. I glanced back at her, expecting confusion or embarrassment. Something. Anything. She just smiled at me, eyes bright, like she was waiting for me to recover. The noise slowly crept back in, one sound at a time. A cough. A chair moving. A forced laugh from somewhere behind me. The cafe returned to normal, but the feeling didn't. My face felt hot. I muttered an apology to no one in particular, even though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. My hands felt clumsy. I knocked my spoon against the table and winced at the sound. She tilted her head slightly, still relaxed, and leaned back in her chair. Her body language didn't match the room at all. It was like she had noticed the shift. I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was coincidence. People get quiet sometimes. Maybe my voice carried. Maybe I imagined the timing. Anxiety messes with perception. But then it happened again. 10 minutes later, she laughed at something else. Softer this time. Barely a laugh. More like a breathy sound through her nose. The cafe dropped into silence again. This time it felt heavier. Every head turned slower, more deliberate. Eyes landed on me and stayed there. No blinking. No whispering. Just that same look. Like I had done something wrong and they were waiting for me to admit it. My heart started pounding. I felt it in my throat. I forced a smile that felt wrong on my face and raised my hands slightly like I was surrendering to an invisible accusation. She didn't stop smiling. I leaned in toward her, lowering my voice instinctively even though no one else was talking. I tried to ask what was happening without actually asking. My words came out tangled and quiet. She watched me like she was watching a show she had already seen. The noise came back again, but it didn't fully settle this time. Conversations resumed, but softer, guarded. People kept glancing at me out of the corners of their eyes. I started to feel separate from my body, like I was watching myself from a few feet away. My hands didn't feel like mine. My mouth felt dry. I excused myself to the bathroom just to get away from the table. As I stood up, I felt every pair of eyes track me. My legs felt weak walking past them. No one moved out of my way. I had to squeeze between chairs, murmuring apologies that no one acknowledged. In the bathroom, I leaned over the sink and stared at a reflection. I looked normal. Scared, but normal. No blood. No obvious mistake written on my face. I splashed water on my cheeks and tried to breathe. When I walked back out, the room felt wrong. Not hostile, watchful, like I was being tolerated. She was still sitting there, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled again, that same easy smile. I sat down slowly. We didn't talk for a minute. I couldn't think of anything safe to say. Every word felt dangerous now, like I was one wrong sound away from setting something off again. She broke the silence by laughing. Not anything. Just a sudden soft laugh, like she remembered something funny. The cafe went dead quiet. This time I felt it before I heard it. The pressure, the shift, the attention slamming into me all at once. Someone at a nearby table shook their head slowly. Someone else crossed their arms. A woman near the window mouthed something I couldn't hear but understood anyway. Enough. My chest tightened. I stood up abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. She finally stopped smiling. Not because she was upset, because she was satisfied. I realized then that it wasn't about the laugh. It was about me. Her laugh was a switch, and it was the thing everyone was reacting to. I backed away from the table, hands up slightly, palms out. My heart hammered. I scanned the room for help, for confusion, for anyone who looked like they didn't know what was going on. They all knew. I turned toward the door and started walking. The silence followed me step for step. No one spoke. No one moved. I felt like I was walking through water. Right before I reached the door, she laughed again. Behind me, someone stood up fast. Another person scoffed under their breath. The weight of their judgment pressed into my back like a physical thing. I didn't turn around. I pushed the door open and stumbled out into the night. The sound of the city hit me like relief. Cars, voices, wind, real noise. I bent over with my hands on my knees, sucking in air. Through the window, I could see back inside. The cafe was loud again. Normal. People talking, laughing, existing. She sat alone at the table now, stirring her drink, smiling to herself. No one was looking at her. Only at the empty chair where I had been. I walked home without stopping, my head buzzing, my skin crawling like it remembered something my brain didn't. I kept expecting people on the street to stop and stare at me the same way. They didn't. Later that night, lying in bed, my phone buzzed with a notification from the app, a review from her. It didn't use words, just a single laughing emoji. I realized I wanted to leave way earlier than I had admitted to myself. It wasn't one big moment. It was a bunch of tiny ones stacking up until my chest felt tight. The kind of tight where you keep telling yourself you're fine, even though you're already planning your escape in your head. I remember noticing the exit sign before anything else went wrong. Bright red, humming softly, right above the door. I clocked it the second I sat down. I always do. I don't know why. Maybe it's just comfort, knowing where out is. The place was a basement bar under a bowling alley. Low ceiling, sticky floors, lights dim enough to hide flaws. The kind of place people say feels cozy, but really just feels trapped if you're already anxious. He picked it. Said it was chill. Said it was quiet on weeknights. He wasn't wrong. There were maybe 8 other people there, spread out, mine somewhere else. He was already seated when I walked in, waiting casually like this was no big deal. I slid into the booth across from him and felt that weird drop in my stomach you get when you're suddenly aware of your body. The vinyl stuck to my legs. The table wobbled. He steadied it with one finger without looking. The conversation started fine. Not exciting, not terrible. Just fine. I kept waiting for a reason to feel excited or uncomfortable. Neither showed up right away. That almost bothered me more. He talked in this calm, steady way, never rushing, never filling silence too fast. Every time I paused, he waited, not awkwardly, patiently. About 20 minutes in, I checked my phone and saw the time. Later than I thought. My brain did that quick math thing where you figure out how long it would take to finish your drink, say goodbye, get home. I glanced at the exit sign again. Still there, still glowing. I shifted in my seat, getting ready to do the whole polite wrap-up thing. I leaned forward, hands on the table, shoulders angled toward the aisle. That's when the light flickered. Just once, fast, like a blink. I froze. Not fully, just enough to notice. I told myself it was nothing. Old building, cheap wiring. I leaned back again, feeling stupid for even thinking about it. He kept talking like nothing happened. His voice stayed even. His expression stayed relaxed. He moved on to a new topic without missing a beat. I nodded along, but my attention kept drifting back to the door. A few minutes later, I tried again. This time I slid my phone into my bag and shifted my legs toward the aisle. My body was already halfway out before my brain caught up. The exit sign flickered again. This time it went out completely. The red glow vanished, leaving a darker patch above the door. The hum stopped. The door itself looked farther away somehow, like it had sunk back into the wall. My heart kicked up. I scanned the room, expecting someone to react. No one did. No gasps. No annoyed looks. It was like it hadn't happened for anyone else. I looked back at him. He was watching me now, and tilted slightly, eyes soft. Not concerned. More curious. Then he smiled and smoothly shifted the conversation again, like he had gently picked up a thread I dropped. I sat back down without fully deciding to. My legs felt heavy. My mouth felt dry. I took a sip of my drink and barely tasted it. The sign flickered back out a minute later, weaker than before, but visible. I exhaled without realizing I had been holding my breath. I told myself I was overthinking. Anxiety makes patterns out of nothing. Buildings have bad wiring. Coincidences happen. I laughed quietly at myself and tried to relax. It didn't work. Every time I started thinking about leaving, my body would angle toward the door and the same thing would happen. Flicker. Off. Darkness above the exit. And every time he would smoothly redirect the conversation. Not abruptly. Not forcefully. Just enough to keep me there. Asking about something I had mentioned earlier. Circling back to a detail from my profile. Grounding me in the moment. It felt less like being trapped and more like being gently held in place. That scared me more. I tested it once without moving. I just thought about leaving. Imagine standing up, grabbing my bag, walking out. The exit sign flickered anyway. My stomach dropped. I stared at the table, my fingers tracing old scratches in the wood. I could feel sweat gathering at the back of my neck. I looked around again. The bartender wiped glasses. 2 people played darts. A couple laughed near the jukebox. Normal. All of it painfully normal. I stood up suddenly, not easing into it this time. The booth creaked loud as I slid out. The exit sign went dark instantly. No flicker. Just off. The room felt smaller. The ceiling felt lower. My ears rang. He didn't move. He didn't reach for me. He just looked up calmly and started talking about something completely unrelated. Something light. Something pointless. His voice cut through the noise like it was meant only for me. My legs trembled. I sat back down. I hated myself for it. The second my weight hit the seat, the exit sign came back on. Bright. Steady, like it was rewarding me. I pressed my lips together and focused on breathing. In through my nose. Out through my mouth. I needed a plan. Panicking wouldn't help. I checked my phone under the table. No signal. I frowned and lifted it higher. Still nothing. That did make sense. I had signal when I walked in. He noticed the movement and smiled again. He leaned back, relaxed, like we had all the time in the world. I felt tears prick my eyes, more from frustration than fear. I wiped them away quickly, hoping he didn't notice. I didn't want to give him that. I tried a different approach. I laughed, forcing it, and leaned forward like I was getting more comfortable instead of less. I asked about the bowling alley upstairs. He brightened at that, launching into a story. As he talked, I slid my bag onto my shoulder slowly, carefully. I kept my body angled toward him, not the door. The exit sign stayed on. Hope sparked in my chest. I stood up casually, like I was just stretching my legs. The sign flickered but didn't go out. I took a step toward the aisle, keeping my eyes on him, nodding along to whatever he was saying. Another step. The light buzzed but held. My heart pounded so hard I thought he must hear it. Then he changed the subject again, abruptly this time. Something personal. Something that hooked my attention without my permission. My focus snapped back to him. My feet stopped moving. The exit sign went dark. I gasped. I couldn't help it. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. He didn't react. He just kept talking, calm and steady, like the world was exactly how it should be. I realized then that it wasn't about the door. It wasn't about the light. It was about my attention. As long as I was focused on him, I stayed. The moment I tried to pull away, the room pushed back. I forced myself to look away from him. It felt like trying to turn my head against a strong wind. My neck muscles ached. My eyes burned. I fixed my gaze on the door, the dark exit sign, the handle, the thin crack of light around the frame. I took a step. My ears rang louder. The room felt like it tilted. I took another step. The sign flickered weakly like it was struggling. He stopped talking. The sudden silence hit harder than any sound. Every noise in the bar seemed to fade into the background. My breath sounded too loud. My heartbeat thundered. I did look back. I walked. Slow at first, then faster. My legs felt like they were pushing through mud. The door felt impossibly far away. Behind me, the light snapped back on. Bright, blinding. I reached the door and grabbed the handle. It was cold, solid, real. I yanked it open and stumbled out into the stairwell. The air was cooler, cleaner. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the railing to keep from falling. I didn't stop until I was outside on the street, the night air hitting my face like a slap. I bent over, hands on my knees, sucking in breath after breath. When I finally straightened, I looked back at the building. From the outside, I could see through the basement windows. The bar looked the same, warm, inviting. The exit sign glowed red above the door. I watched for a long time. I never saw him look my way. I knew something was wrong before I knew what it was. It was that tight buzzing feeling in my head, like when you forget something important but can't figure out what. The night started normal enough, almost boring. I remember thinking that was a good sign. Boring meant safe. Boring meant I could go home and forget about it without replaying everything in my head. We met at a food truck parked near the edge of town, the kind with string lights and picnic tables that wobble if you lean too hard. It smelled like fried stuff and smoke and sweet drinks. People were laughing too loud, kids running around even though it was late. I liked that there were so many people. It made me feel invisible in a good way. He was already there, sitting on one of the benches, phone in his hand, head down. When he looked up and smiled, it felt easy. Not forced. Not intense. Just easy. That disarmed me more than anything. I sat across from him, and we talked about nothing important. Work complaints. Bad movies. Dumb stuff you say when you're trying to feel someone out. His phone was face down on the table. I noticed because I'm the kind of person who always notices phones. Maybe it's a trust thing. Maybe it's just habit. Every once in a while, it buzzed softly. Not a call. Not a loud notification. Just a quiet vibration like it was clearing its throat. He didn't check it right away. That felt polite. Normal. Eventually, he flipped it over and glanced at the screen, his eyebrows pulling together for a second before smoothing out. He smiled again, but it was thinner this time. Distracted. I asked if everything was okay. He nodded quickly. Too quickly. He said it was nothing. I didn't push. First dates aren't for pushing. We got food and came back to the table. I noticed he angled his chair slightly away from me now, like he was giving himself more space. His phone sat closer to his elbow. Screen up. It buzzed again. And again. This time, when he looked, his face went pale. Not dramatic pale. Just enough that I saw it even in the bad lighting. He swallowed hard. His thumb hovered over the screen like he was afraid to touch it. I leaned forward without thinking. I caught a glimpse of the screen before he tilted it away. It was the photo app. A grid of thumbnails, all from tonight. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because my brain didn't know what else to do. I made a joke about him being a secret photographer or something. He didn't laugh back. He turned the phone slightly so I could see. Not all the way, just enough. The photos were of us, sitting at the table, eating, talking, leaning in. Every angle was wrong, too close, too low, like whoever took them was standing right behind him. I felt my smile slide off my face. I looked around fast, the picnic tables, the people, the lights. No one standing close enough. No one holding a phone pointed at us, just strangers in their own bubbles. He scrolled. More photos loaded in. My stomach twisted. There were dozens. Hundreds maybe. Taken minutes apart. Seconds apart. Some blurry like the camera moved fast. Some sharp enough that I could see the freckles on my nose. Every single one was from behind him. I leaned back in my seat. My heart was beating so loud I felt it in my throat. I tried to think logically. Maybe a glitch. Maybe some weird sync from another device, but the timestamps were right. The location tags were right, and the angle never changed. I checked behind him again. Nothing. Just the back of his jacket, the string lights, people walking past without a second glance. His hands were shaking now, not a lot, but enough that the phone rattled slightly against the table. He locked the screen like that might make it stop. It buzzed again immediately. I didn't know what to do with my body. I didn't know if I should stand up or sit still or run. Everything felt wrong. The air felt thicker, louder. He unlocked the phone again. More photos, some from earlier, walking through the park, standing in line at the truck. One of me laughing, head thrown back, taken from so close it felt invasive. My skin crawled. I wrapped my arms around myself without realizing it. Then I saw one that didn't make sense. It was of me arriving. I was walking toward the tables, scanning the crowd. I remembered that moment clearly. I had been nervous, adjusting my jacket, checking my phone. The photo showed all of that. But the angle was still wrong, behind him, which meant whoever took it was already there, already standing right where he was sitting now. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were wide, unfocused, like he was trying not to panic. This didn't feel like a setup. It felt like he was as trapped as I was. The phone buzzed again. This time the screen did show a photo. It showed the camera half open, live view, the little circle blinking like it was recording. I stared at the screen. The live view showed the back of his head, and behind it, just barely in frame, a shape. Tall, too tall, blurry around the edges like the camera couldn't focus on it. I looked up fast. There was nothing there. I looked back at the screen. The shape leaned closer, closer to him, closer to the camera. I could make out shoulders now. A head, no face, just darkness where features should be. My chest felt tight. I couldn't get a full breath. He dropped the phone like it burned him. It hit the table and bounced, landing face up. The camera was still open. The shape lifted a hand. I screamed. I didn't even realize I was going to. A sound ripped out of me. People turned. Conversations paused. Someone laughed awkwardly like they thought it was a joke. The phone screen went black. Notifications flooded in all at once. The buzzing turned into a constant hum. He grabbed the phone again, fingers clumsy. He opened the gallery. More photos had appeared. Dozens more, taken in the last few seconds. The last one made my stomach drop through the floor. It was from behind him. But it wasn't us anymore. It was just me. Standing up, screaming, hands half raised, eyes wide. And behind me, empty space. I didn't wait for him. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I grabbed my bag and backed away from the table, my eyes scanning everywhere at once. Behind the benches, between the trucks, shadows, people. Nothing looked wrong, which somehow made it worse. I ran. I didn't stop until I hit the street, the noise of cars grounding me just enough to slow down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost threw it away. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. A notification from a number I didn't recognize. A photo. I didn't want to open it. Every part of me screamed not to, but I did anyway. It was taken from behind me. Me walking away from the park. The message under it wasn't words, just a time, a location, and a small blinking dot like it was still tracking. I turned around slowly. The sidewalk behind me was empty. I ran all the way home and didn't stop until I slammed my door shut and locked it. I sat on the floor of my lib with my back against the door, my phone face down on the carpet. It kept buzzing. I didn't look again. The first thing that felt off wasn't her. It was me. I caught my reflection in the restaurant window before I even opened the door, and I looked wrong somehow, like my face didn't line up with itself. One eye looked tired, the other looked alert, and my mouth was set in this tight line I didn't remember choosing. I almost walked away right there. I told myself it was nerves. First dates do that. Mirrors mess with you at night. I wish I had listened to that tiny part of my brain that wanted to bail. The restaurant was one of those newer places pretending to be old. Fake brick walls, fake candles, menus printed to look worn. It was right on a busy street, all glass up front so you could see everyone eating like they were on display. She was already inside, sitting by the window, her face lit by passing headlights. When she saw me, she smiled wide and waved, like this was already comfortable territory. That smile disarmed me. It made everything else feel quieter. We sat down, and the night rolled forward the way nights like that usually do. Water on the table. Menus we barely looked at. The low buzz of other people trying to have a good time. I remember thinking how normal it felt, how relieved I was that she wasn't awkward or quiet or overly intense. She leaned forward when she listened. She laughed easily. Her hands moved when she talked, cutting the air in smooth shapes. Nothing about her felt threatening. It was the window that ruined it. The glass beside us was dark enough to act like a mirror, especially with the lights behind us. I kept catching glimpses of us reflected there. Two people leaning toward each other, heads close, looking like a couple already. It was distracting, but kind of nice at first. I like seeing how things look from the outside sometimes. It makes stuff feel real. Then I noticed something small. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements exactly. Not in a dramatic way. Just enough to make my brain itch. When she lifted her glass, the reflection lagged a half second. When she tilted her head, the reflection stayed still a moment longer than it should have. I told myself it was the angle, the lighting, passing cars. I focused back on her. She was smiling, telling a story with her hands, completely relaxed. I nodded along, pretending I wasn't watching the glass out of the corner of my eye. The next time I looked, the reflection was smiling. It was still her face. Same hair, same eyes, same shape. But the mouth was flat, tense. The eyes looked wider, almost strained. And then the reflection did something that made my stomach drop. It moved its lips in a slow, exaggerated way, forming words without sound. I blinked hard and looked back at her real face, still smiling, still eating, still normal. No sign of anything wrong. I looked back at the window. The reflection was smiling again, perfectly sensed now. My heart started beating faster. Not panic fast, more like alert fast. I tried to ground myself. Busy restaurant. Last reflections can double. Maybe I was seeing someone else behind us layered over her face. Maybe my brain was tired. A few minutes passed. Food arrived. The smell filled the space between us. She dug in immediately, clearly hungry, clearly enjoying herself. I barely touched mine. My appetite was gone. The reflection did it again. This time it was clearer. Her reflection leaned closer to the glass, even though she didn't move. Its smile dropped, and its mouth formed words slowly, urgently. The eyes locked straight onto mine in the glass, not at her, at me. I didn't hear anything, obviously, but I didn't need to. The shape of the words felt obvious. Leave. Don't stay. Wrong. I snapped my gaze back to her. She was chewing, nodding, looking completely unaware. She swallowed and smiled at me like she was waiting for a reaction. A forced one. My face felt stiff, like it did belong to me. I checked the room. No one else seemed to notice anything. People laughed. Servers moved between tables. Glasses clinked. The world kept going. I looked back at the window, and the reflection was back to normal again, smiling like a copy-pasted version of her real face. My chest felt tight. My hands were damp. I tried an experiment. I shifted in my seat without breaking eye contact with her. In the glass, the reflection stayed still. Then slowly, it lifted its hand and pressed it flat against the glass, palm out, like it was trying to reach me. I felt cold all over. She laughed at something, leaned back, took a sip of her drink. Her reflection didn't follow. It stayed there, palm pressed to the window, mouth moving again, faster this time. The words overlapped each other. The warning felt frantic now. I couldn't look away. My body felt locked in place. My brain was screaming at me to stand up, to leave, to do anything. But my legs wouldn't move. Then the reflection did something worse. It shook its head. Slow. Deliberate. Like it was disappointed. Like I wasn't listening. Then it smiled again, but wrong. Too wide. Too stretched. And mouthed one last thing. You already stayed too long. My vision tunneled. I broke eye contact and looked down at the table, at my hands, at the stupid plate of food I hadn't eaten. I took a breath. Then another. I told myself I was spiraling. Anxiety can cause visual stuff. Reflections are tricky. This was just my brain messing with me. When I looked back up, she reached across the table and touched my wrist lightly. The contact jolted me. Her hand was warm. Real. Solid. She smiled, concern flickering across her face for just a second before smoothing out again. I glanced at the window. The reflection was gone. Not just neutral. Gone. The glass showed the street behind us, the blur of cars, the glow of streetlights. No version of her at all, like she didn't exist in the reflection anymore. My pulse pounded in my ears. I tried to subtly shift to see from a different angle. Still nothing. She was there. The table was there. I was there. But the glass was empty. She went back to eating like nothing happened. I sat there frozen, watching her chew, watching her smile, watching her exist only in the real world. After a while, the reflection came back. It was her again, smiling, eating, perfectly since, like nothing had happened, like it had never left. I don't know why that scared me more than the warnings. The rest of the night blurred together. I nodded when I was supposed to. I smiled when it felt required. I kept one eye on the glass the whole time. The reflection behaved after that. No more mornings, no more delays, just a perfect mirror. When the check came, I noticed something strange. The reflection picked it up first. Its hand moved before hers did, a fraction of a second, but enough for me to notice. Enough for my stomach to twist. We stood to leave. I felt dizzy. When we walked toward the door, I stayed on the inside, away from the windows. I didn't want to see it again. I didn't want to know what it would do next. Outside, the night air felt sharp and clean. The glass behind us reflected the street, the cars, the people walking by. I glanced back once, just once. The reflection showed her still sitting at the table, smiling, eating alone. I did it again. I didn't even plan to eat that night. I remember staring into my fridge before I left, seeing half a lemon and a takeout box from 3 days ago, and thinking this date was already more effort than it deserved. I almost canceled. My stomach felt tight in that way it does when you know you're forcing yourself into something. But I went anyway because staying in felt worse, like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit yet. We met outside a diner that looked stuck in time. Long windows, buzzing lights, a faded sign that probably used to be red. It was on a service road near the highway, not romantic at all, but open late, which mattered to me. He was already there, leaning against the window, hands in his jacket pockets. When he saw me, his face softened like he was relieved I showed up. That part felt nice. Familiar, even though it shouldn't have. Inside, everything smelled like grease and coffee. The booths were cracked vinyl, the kind that makes a noise when you slide in. I picked a seat facing the window out of habit. He sat across from me without asking, like that was always the plan. I didn't think much of it at first. Some people are decisive. I like that. The waitress came by fast, barely slowing down. Before I could even open the menu all the way, he ordered, not just for himself, for me too. I remember blinking at him, caught off guard, but not mad yet. I figured he was trying to be confident. Some guys do that thing where they think it makes them look cool. What he ordered hit me a second later. It was something specific. Not common diner food. Not something you guess. It was the kind of meal you only know if you've watched someone eat it 100 times. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself lots of people like that dish. But the way he leaned back afterward, relaxed, like he had done the right thing, made my skin prickle. He smiled at me, proud in a quiet way, and then his mouth moved again. He mentioned how I used to love it. Past tense, like it was a shared memory. Then he added the part that snapped something loose in my head. He reminded me I stopped liking it after the accident. My brain went white for a second. Not blank. More like overloaded. The word accident echoed around in my skull, bouncing off memories that didn't feel fully mine. I didn't answer. I don't think I even breathed. I don't talk about any accident. Not because it's traumatic or secret, but because there isn't one. Nothing big. Nothing that would make someone stop liking a food. I ran through my past fast, like flipping channels, scraped knees, fender benders, broken phone screens. Nothing that fit. He didn't seem worried by my silence. He just watched me, like he was waiting for me to catch up. Like I was lagging behind in a conversation we had already had before. The food came out fast. Too fast. Like it had been waiting. The plate slid in front of me, and the smell hit my nose. Sharp and familiar in a way I didn't like. My mouth watered even though my stomach twisted. I stared at it, trying to figure out why it looked so right and so wrong at the same time. He noticed my hesitation and leaned forward a little. His expression softened, almost apologetic. His mouth moved again, slow and careful. He explained that I used to order it every time, that I would say it tasted like comfort, that after the accident, I couldn't stand the smell anymore. My hands started shaking, not visibly, just enough that I felt it. I pressed them flat against the table to steady them. My heart was beating hard, but my head felt weirdly calm, like it had slipped into survival mode. I tried to ask questions, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight. Instead, I watched him. The way he held his fork, the way he chewed, the way he kept glancing at me like he was checking something off a list. I noticed details then that I had ignored before. The small scar near his hairline, the way his jacket sleeve was frayed at the cuff, the fact that his eyes looked tired, but not in a normal way, more like someone who had been waiting a long time. He reached for his water and took a sip, then mentioned the hospital. Not by name, just as a place we had spent a lot of time. He talked about long nights and bad vending machine snacks and how I hated the beeping noises. His mouth moved like he was telling the story we both knew, like he was filling in gaps I was supposed to remember. I felt sick. Not because of the food, because of the creeping sense that some version of me had lived a life I couldn't access, like there was a locked room in my head and he had the key. I glanced down at my hands. My left wrist had a faint line I had never paid much attention to. Not a scar exactly, just a lighter patch of skin. I rubbed it with my thumb. Suddenly, an image flashed through my mind. Bright lights, the smell of disinfectant, a monitor sound, my own voice, weak and slurred. It was gone as fast as it came, leaving my chest tight and my eyes burning. He noticed that too. His face changed, just a little. Relief, maybe, like he had been waiting for that reaction. He leaned back again, satisfied. I pushed the plate away from me. The movement felt huge, like everyone in the diner must have noticed, even though no one looked over. The food slid an inch and stopped. The smell lingered. He didn't argue. He just nodded like this was expected. His mouth moved again. He said it was okay, that he remembered how hard it was for me, that I didn't have to force myself. That was the worst part. Not the knowledge, not the implication. It was the care in it, the familiarity, the way he spoke like someone who had already seen me broken. I stood up suddenly. The booth creaked loud under me. My legs felt weak, but they held. I grabbed my jacket and slung it over my shoulder. My head was buzzing now, full of half-memories and questions I didn't want answered. He stayed seated. He looked up at me, calm, patient, like this was the first time I had done this with her. As I walked toward the door, I passed a mirror mounted near the counter. I caught my reflection and froze. For a split second, I didn't recognize myself. My face looked thinner, paler, older somehow, then it snapped back to normal. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. I sucked it in like I had been underwater. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. There was a message from him, time-stamped weeks ago. I had read it before, but I didn't remember it. It talked about being glad I was finally feeling better, about how proud he was of me for trying again, about how this date didn't have to be heavy, just food, just us. I blocked the number. I walked home instead of calling a ride. Every step felt unreal. My street looked different. My building looked unfamiliar. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside my live, I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet. Later that night, I found a hospital bracelet in the back of my junk drawer. My name was on it. My birthday was right. The date was wrong. 2 years I couldn't account for. I didn't sleep. I didn't expect anything weird to happen that night. It was raining the soft, annoying kind that soaks your hoodie and makes the bus smell like wet metal. I remember thinking how normal everything felt, which is funny now because that feeling didn't last long at all. I was just going on a first date with a girl I met online. Nothing dramatic, nothing intense. Just coffee and walking around a closed-down arcade near the river. I almost didn't go because I felt lazy and broke and tired of pretending I cared. But I went anyway, and that's where it all started to slide sideways. I noticed her before she noticed me. She was already there, sitting on a low brick wall by the arcade entrance, staring at the reflection in the dark windows like she was checking for something behind her. She wore the same jacket from her pictures, the faded green one with the busted zipper, When she turned and smiled at me, it wasn't awkward or shy. It was like she had been waiting a while and finally got bored of waiting. From the start, things moved too smoothly, not in a good way. It felt like I had skipped steps. Normally, there is that phase where you search for topics or over-explain dumb stuff. This wasn't like that. We walked without planning it. We picked the same direction without saying anything. When I stopped to check my phone, she stopped too. It felt like sensing Bluetooth without asking. Inside the arcade, it smelled like old carpet and sugar. Half the machines were covered in black bags. The lights flickered like they were tired. I remember thinking how this place always made me sad, even as a kid. I never told her that. But she slowed down near the racing game in the corner, the one with the cracked seat, and her face changed like she had remembered something personal. She touched the steering wheel and looked at me like she was checking if I noticed. Something about the way she acted around that machine made me think of my first serious girlfriend. The one who used to drive me to arcades and beat me every time and laugh about it for days. I didn't say that either. I didn't even finish the thought. But she nodded, just once, like she had heard it. Not like guessing, like confirming. That was the first moment I felt that cold drop in my chest. Not fear exactly. More like when you forget what day it is and realize you lost time. As we walked deeper, she kept doing it. Little things. I would start thinking about my exes without meaning to, like random memories popping up because of places or smells. And she would react to them. She would stop at a vending machine and frown. And suddenly, I would remember the girl who used to cry every time the snacks got stuck. She would rub her thumb against her wrist, and I would remember the scar my second girlfriend had from falling off a bike. She never asked questions. She never needed answers. It felt like she was finishing my sentences without words, finishing my thoughts, correcting them too. There was one memory I always got wrong. I used to think my first breakup happened in winter. I remembered snow. I remembered my breath fogging. I remembered the sound of boots on ice. But while I was thinking about it, she shook her head slowly and pointed at the broken ceiling where rain dripped through. And suddenly the memory shifted. I remembered rain instead of snow, the smell of wet asphalt, the sound of cars. I had been wrong for years, and somehow she fixed it without touching me. We sat on the floor near the old photo booth. I don't know why. I don't remember choosing to sit. It just happened. She leaned back against the machine and stared at the ceiling like she was counting stains. I stared at her shoes and tried to calm down. My heart felt loud. My thoughts felt like they were being sorted by someone else. I started wondering how much she knew. Not in a dramatic way. More like curiosity mixed with dread. I thought about my last ex, the one I never talk about. The one that ended so quietly it felt unfinished. The one whose name I avoid even in my head. I barely let the thought form before she pressed her heel against the floor and twisted it, nervous, the exact thing my ex used to do when she was about to cry but didn't want anyone to notice. That was when I knew this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't intuition. This wasn't good listening. She wasn't learning me. She was remembering me. I tried grounding myself, noticing details. The hum of the broken machine, the drip of water, the sticky floor. I reminded myself that people can read body language, that humans see patterns even when they aren't real. But then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded receipt. It was old and crumpled and faded. She smoothed it on her knee like it mattered. I recognized it instantly. It was from a gas station 2 towns over. A place I stopped at during a fight with my third girlfriend, the night she told me she needed space, and I drove until I ran out of gas. I had kept that receipt in my wallet for years for no reason I could explain. I lost it during a move. I never told anyone about it. I never showed it to anyone, and yet it was there in her hand like it had always belonged to her. She didn't look at me. She just folded it back up and put it away, like she was done with it, like she was done with that part of me. After that, my head felt light, like I was floating a few inches behind myself. Memories kept lining up in my mind, and she kept reacting to them before I even fully read them. She knew which ex hated tomatoes. She knew which one slept with the light on. She knew the exact reason the last one left, the real one I never admit. Not because I was distant or busy, but because I stopped noticing what she changed. Every time I thought I had control again, she took it back. Not forcefully. Casually, like she was just adjusting the volume. We eventually left the arcade. I don't remember deciding to. We walked toward the river where the lights reflected like broken lines. She stopped at the railing and leaned forward. I stood beside her, staring at the water, trying not to panic. I felt like I was being read by someone who had lived my life already and got bored enough to skim. I wondered what she wanted from me. I wondered if this was some kind of test or joke or a long setup. I wondered if I was in danger, but the strongest thought was something else. Relief, because for once, someone understood everything without me having to explain, and that scared me more than anything. When she finally turned to leave, I felt it coming before it happened. The ending of the night, the point where I would normally ask for a number or another date, the point where things split into maybe or never. She didn't wait for that moment. She stepped back, nodded like we had finished something important, and walked away toward the bus stop. I stayed there by the river for a long time after the rain stopped. My phone buzzed with nothing. My head slowly filled back up with my own thoughts. But some of them didn't feel like mine anymore. Some memories felt edited, corrected, polished. Later that night, I checked my wallet out of habit. The receipt was gone. I don't remember taking it out. I don't remember losing it again. But I remember feeling like someone had closed a book they were done with. I remember telling myself it was just food and an excuse to get out of my room. My phone was dying, my hoodie smelled like old fries, and my expectations were sitting somewhere below zero. Still, when I walked up to the restaurant and saw her standing under the flickering sign, I felt that dumb spark of hope people pretend they don't get anymore. It felt normal. Too normal. Like the kind of night you forget as soon as it ends. That should have been my first warning. The place was a small corner restaurant wedged between a nail salon and a closed thrift store. Warm lights, fake plants in the window, handwritten specials taped to the glass. Nothing fancy. The kind of spot where you go because it is close, not because it is good. I had picked it because I had never been there before. I liked neutral ground. She smiled when she saw it. Not surprised, not curious, just calm, like the building was an old friend. Inside, the air was thick with garlic and something sweet. The floor stuck to my shoes. There was a low hum of people talking and plates clinking. I noticed she didn't look around the way people usually do in new places. She didn't scan the room or squint at the menu board. She walked straight ahead like she already knew where to go. Before I could even pull my chair out, the waiter appeared. Mid-30s maybe, tired eyes, apron stained like it had been washed too many times. He looked at her and smiled in a way that felt practiced but personal at the same time. Then he nodded at me like I was part of the background. His mouth moved. I didn't hear every word clearly over the noise, but I heard enough. He said her name, the right one, and he thanked her for coming back. My brain lagged behind for a second. I stood there holding the chair like an idiot, waiting for her to correct him. People do that automatically, especially on first dates, especially when something like that happens. But she did. She didn't smile bigger or look confused. She just acted like that was a normal thing to hear. Like of course he knew her. Like of course she had been here before. The part that really messed me up was the way he looked at me after. Not curious. Not welcoming. More like recognition mixed with confusion. Like he was seeing me again but couldn't place from where. Then he gestured for us to sit, already reaching for menus like he knew what we wanted. We sat. My head felt tight. I kept telling myself there were a dozen explanations. Same name as someone else. Mistaken identity. Maybe she had been here once and forgot. Maybe I misheard. But the words stuck in my head, coming back. The name, the familiarity. She leaned back in her chair and looked around finally, but not in a curious way. More checking that everything was still where it should be. I tried to focus on the menu. My eyes slid over the words without read them. Everything cost more than I expected. Nothing sounded good. The waiter came back almost immediately with water for her. Only her. He placed it gently like it mattered. Then he paused, like waiting for something else to happen. His eyes flicked between us. I could feel sweat starting under my arms. My phone buzzed. I did check it. I didn't want to break whatever invisible thread was holding the moment together. Instead, I watched her. She didn't seem nervous. She was trying to impress me. She was filling silence with jokes or stories. She just existed there like she belonged to the room. When the waiter returned again, he brought bread. He set it closer to her side of the table. His mouth moved again. He mentioned how she always ordered early, how she never liked waiting, how it was good to see her again. Each sentence felt like someone tapping a hammer against my skull. Not loud, just steady. I looked at her hands. They were steady, not fidgeting. She broke the bread without thinking, like muscle memory, like she had done it here before, with someone, maybe with me. I tried to backtrack the night. We met online, a basic app, a few messages, nothing deep, nothing that suggested shared history. I scrolled through our chat in my head. First message. Joke about a bad photo. A few days of nothing. Then plans. This was supposed to be clean. New. But then little things started stacking up. The way she angled her chair. The way she placed her phone screen down on the table in the exact same spot every time the waiter passed. The way she glanced for the kitchen door like she expected someone specific to come out. The waiter came again, this time with a plate. Not ordered. He set it down in front of her like it was routine. Something she always got. He didn't ask. He didn't check. Just nodded and walked away. She did touch the food right away. She looked at it with this tired fondness like she was already bored of it, like she had eaten it too many times before. My stomach turned. I hadn't ordered anything. No one asked me to. I started wondering if I was the only one who thought this was a first date. The thought hit me hard and wouldn't leave. What if this had already happened? Not like déjà vu. Not like a dream. But actually happened. What if I was a repeat? What if she was too? I checked my phone then. Still nothing. No missed calls. No messages warning me. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen, pale and stretched. The waiter came back with a look that felt apologetic. His mouth moved slowly like he was choosing words carefully. He glanced at me, then at her. Then back to me. I caught fragments. Last time. Usual. Same as before. He nodded like he had reached a conclusion. Something clicked in my chest. Not fear exactly. More like understanding. I wasn't new to him because I was there last time. I was new because I wasn't supposed to be here this time. I finally pushed my chair back. The sound scraped loud against the floor. Heads turned. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes searched my face like she was checking if I remembered. There was no surprise in her expression. Just disappointment. Like a plan had gone slightly wrong. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to decide if I was overreacting or underreacting. My legs felt weak. The room felt smaller. The lights too warm. The smell too thick. She reached for her phone finally. Not to text. Just to hold it. The screen lit up. I saw my name on it. Not a contact photo. Just my name. But there was a long list under it. Dates, times, locations. The restaurant name appeared more than once. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the waiter to look uncomfortable. Long enough for the bread to go cold. Long enough for something inside me to shut off. I left without touching anything. I don't remember walking out, but I remember the cool air hitting my face and the sound of traffic like a wave. My phone buzzed again. Still nothing. I walked until my legs burned. Later that night, I read through our old messages again. They were still the same. Nothing new. Nothing missing. But one message at the very top wasn't read before. Sent weeks ago from me. Asking if she wanted to try that place again.